Chapter 1206. It was really him. The leader had never imagined that he would meet this person. But those light brows and deep eyes all indicated that it was indeed him. All the mercenaries were retired from the previous armies of various countries. Back then, there had been a training for the top talents of the military in the Amazon. The leader had been a member of the M government back then. He had met Qin Mo then. Of course, he didn't know Qin Mo's name. He only knew his code name. Young Master. This person had defeated the military talents of the various countries. When he had won glory for the country, he hadn't even been in second place. The leader had tasted Qin Mo's prowess. But all these years he had never heard of this code name in any of the military units in China. Moreover, there were rumors that this person had been eliminated by the organization he was currently in. Hence, the leader had never felt that there was anything to be afraid of. Now, when he saw that person, even his back was stiff. The people on the destroyer started to descend, surrounding him in the middle. Capture him alive. The person only said 2 words, but it made the leader's hair stand on end. He couldn't imagine what would happen to him if he landed in the hands of this person. Did Kawang know that this person had returned? It was obvious that Kawang didn't know. The news he received was that Qin Mo had been kicked out of the military and the hypnosis hadn't been removed. The military wouldn't allow a person with hypnosis to carry out a mission. Under normal circumstances, that would be the case. If it wasn't for the fact that this matter was too difficult to deal with and for the sake of safety, Qin Mo wouldn't have returned. But this was based on Qin Mo's own will. Kawang would probably never understand. In Wuxia there were some people who were born to protect. One was the Tang family and the other was the Qin family. Those responsibilities and burdens had already been engraved into their bones. Whenever we're needed here, we'll be there. This was what a young major general with the surname Tang had said a long time ago when he was filling out his retirement report. It was the same for Qin Mo. Even Kawang couldn't understand it, much less the leader. Everything had ended. The operation had been successful. There weren't any casualties. This was the news from this side. The next team was different. When they were searching the forest, they found 2 corpses. It was these 2 people that stopped the mercenaries from crossing the defense line. Being stationed at the dangerous border was a kind of bravery in itself. Because those who had never been there would never understand what kind of mentality they had and what kind of harsh environment they had overcome in order to hold on to this inch of land. The leader was dragged onto the fighter jet by the special forces. Qin Mo lifted his eyes and looked at the person who was still standing beside the tree. He called out twice in a row, but the person did not respond. Instead, he tilted his head and patted his ears. Qin Mo leaped over, his eyes still red. Without a word, he cupped the youngster's face, his voice low. Your ears are ringing from the explosion? Bo Jiao couldn't hear his words, but she could read his lips. She nodded and wanted to slap him again. However, her hand was grabbed by the Almighty. With his free hand, he reached out to touch her ear. This one? Her instincts told her that the Almighty wasn't in his right state. His eyes were bloodshot and this wasn't his usual self. That was indeed the case. Sometimes, the more a profiler forced himself to analyze and write calmly, the more pressure he had to endure. Every time he did a profiling, it would take a lot of effort to analyze everyone's route and the other party's method. This was the image that Qin Mo had already sketched in his mind. But even so, he was worried that he would make a mistake. If he made a mistake, the price he would have to pay would be her. Bo Jiao felt the grip on her wrist tightening. The other hand was caressing her ear gently, his voice low. What about now, can you hear me? Boss. Bo Jiao felt that it was time to get closer to him. Hence she leaned closer. Qin Mo still, not saying a word. When no one was looking, Bo Jiao lowered her voice. Perhaps a kiss will make it better. This time, Qin Mo smiled, the blood in his eyes fading. A kiss will make it better? Yes, Bo Jiao replied seriously. Qin Mo's fingers rubbed the ear again. His voice became as deep as the night. I'm scared. Bo Jiao hadn't expected to hear this. She froze. Qin Mo watched her, his gaze hiding too many things. What if I don't arrive on time? Bo Jiao felt that it was time for her to say something. Just as she was thinking about it, the hand on her ear left and the grip on her wrist tightened. Captain Qin. A patrolling soldier walked over and saluted. Clean up, we found all the phones and the guns. Got it? Qin Mo's voice was calm. Inform the troops, someone is injured. The patrolling soldier. Someone was injured? Where? This wasn't something he could ask. He could only contact the medical department immediately after receiving the order. Very quickly he lifted his head. The doctor asked about the specific situation. Where is the injury in the lungs? Does he need surgery and how is the blood loss? Temporary tinnitus caused by the explosion. The patrolling soldier wasn't the only one who froze. Even the doctor who received the call felt his mouth twitch. Boss, are you kidding me? Why did he have to inform him about a tinnitus? He was an authoritative person. Be it psychology or surgery, he was the best of the best. And now he had to treat a temporary tinnitus. The person with the codename doctor wanted to say something. As usual, Chinamo didn't give him a chance to speak. He brought Bo Jiao onto the plane. The patrolling soldier was on the same plane as well. He took the opportunity when Captain Chin turned on his Bluetooth earpiece to make the final report. He lowered his voice. Boss, the injured person isn't you, right? Bo Jiao lifted her head and looked at the curve of the plane, her posture lazy. It should be. The patrolling soldier paused. But can't you hear me? What happened to the tinnitus? Bo Jiao tilted her head, her gaze devilish. Youngster, you are still too young. She had made a mistake. If she didn't pretend to be sick, the Almighty would punish her to stand facing the wall. But Bo Jiao hadn't expected that her tinnitus would cause her to be treated like a level 1 disabled person. This time she was probably famous in the military. It could be seen from the shock in the patrolling soldier's eyes. Bo Jiao thought that was the end of the shock. But unexpectedly, when they alighted from the plane, the Almighty suddenly carried her up. Bo Jiao hugged his neck instinctively. The next second, she fell into his embrace, her face rubbing against his. His soft skin and the curve of his face, along with the faint smell of gunpowder. The patrolling soldier wasn't just shocked. Instead, he looked as though it was the end of the world. Hunter and magician, who had been waiting for a long time, widened their eyes. After all, when they saw this scene, they couldn't describe how they felt. The doctor frowned and asked, "What's this? Carried? When had their boss carried anyone before? An injured person." The two indifferent words were heard, and the straight men on the other side heaved a huge sigh of relief. So it was an injured person. Captain Chin still cared about them occasionally. This was the reaction of the soldiers. When Hunter and magician heard the two words, they glanced at each other before shifting their gazes away. This was a good explanation. The doctor's lips twitched. "Boss, explain to me. What kind of injured person with tinnitus needed to be carried into the infirmary?" But the others weren't paying attention to this. Every soldier stationed here only knew one thing, and that was that their operation had succeeded. In the past, there had been people who felt that recruit number 10 wasn't very powerful and that everything was just luck. But now such voices were gone. This was because they all knew how dangerous it was to stalk someone without any ammunition or even to fight with them. They were gambling with their lives. If the youngster hadn't been there, they wouldn't have known about this invasion. Even if they had known, they wouldn't have been able to eliminate them at the best time. No one would forget this point. Number 10 was worthy of that military uniform. He was even more outstanding than them. Due to the severity of the situation, the general and regiment commander took the military plane together and sent all the information to Jianghu City at the first instance. From all aspects, it was confirmed that the mercenaries were Kawang's subordinates. And through the sniper's brief recount, it was confirmed. They wanted to let China know how they would take revenge if they cut off their source of income. After seeing the photos and the soldiers who had sacrificed themselves, the higher-ups immediately issued an order to wipe out all places related to the drug. Especially in the border cities between the three countries, they received heavy news. Once the poisonous powder appeared in the market, the relevant departments would be held responsible. Entertainment venues would be on the lookout too. Any channels and individuals would be punished. Once the drug addicts were discovered, they would be detained. No matter who they were or what connections they had, it would be useless. In an instant, it was different from the past. Because those who were sacrificed couldn't be allowed to die in vain. In this world, especially in China, there would always be a group of people risking their lives to deal with the most ruthless drug lords. They wanted to clean up a piece of land. No one knew what harm this thing could bring to people. It wasn't just something that killed people. It was something that could turn a person into something neither human nor ghost. Choosing to enter the field of narcotics was equivalent to having one foot in the coffin. Some people were even willing to go undercover in order to find out how they operated. It was to prevent these things from flowing into the country. Perhaps, those who chose to forgive the drug addicts had never thought that there were other people using their lives to protect this land. In order to prevent their country from being seen as weak. In order to ensure that the people who left the country would always remember that no matter when or what they encountered outside, there would always be a strong shield behind them. It was a pity that not everyone could understand it. The sky outside turned darker. After the success of the operation, The troops became even quieter, because they really needed a good sleep. In terms of garrison, there were twice the number of soldiers. The biggest change was in the area of garrison. It extended another 1,000 meters. Regardless of how many families lived at the other end of the no man's land, there might not even be 7 or 8 herdsmen. There were still garrison soldiers and hidden sentries protecting the area. Everyone's morale wasn't very high. Even if something didn't happen to their troops, it was the people from the neighboring regiment. Usually, they didn't like each other during military demonstrations, but they didn't expect this to happen. The doctor who was doing a psychological test with a pen also realized that after this incident, some soldiers were not suitable to stay. However, this wasn't the main point. The main point was that as a doctor he was actually chased out. And he was chased out from the infirmary. He scratched his face with the pen. Why were there mosquitoes in this weather? The doctor in the white coat was really pitiful. Squatting outside the door, what else could he do? He could only find another place to sleep. However, there was one thing that he was concerned about. He had heard from the sniper that before his boss entered the forest, he wasn't in a good state. Indeed, something wasn't right. When the doctor saw his boss for the first time, he noticed that his eyes were bloodshot. That was related to his head and mental state. This meant that before this, his boss's head must have been hurting to a certain extent. But why was he still so calm? The entire unit, including General Qin, was worried. Once his boss couldn't take it, what would he do? During the mission, he would recall the past and his head would hurt so much that he couldn't hold his gun. He was the soul of the entire unit. If he made a mistake, the mission wouldn't be completed. However, today the doctor turned back to take a look. He muttered to himself subconsciously, "It's not that it doesn't hurt. Rather, compared to the pain, there's someone important waiting for him." That's why he forced himself to calm down. He even forgot about the pain. He remembered what his former mentor had said. Don't underestimate Qin. His mental state was so strong that it was scary. It was indeed scary. However, it was scary that wouldn't hurt anyone. This was probably the reason why they trusted their boss so much. No matter how many years had passed or what he had been through, he had never changed. Except for the fact that he was abusing dogs. The doctor adjusted his white coat again. He decided not to look for trouble anymore. At this moment, the lights in the entire unit were turned off. Even the light in the infirmary was illuminated by a large flashlight. When it shone on the young man on the sick bed, there was an indescribable haze to it. Chapter 1207. Qin Imo stood beside the bed, pouring a cup of hot water for a certain someone. His eyes met the jade-like curve. His gaze deepened. Then he raised his hand and drank a mouthful of water. Bojio paused. "Brother Imo, isn't that water for me?" It was. After Qin Imo finished the water, he placed the cup at the side and bent down, his fingers touching her ear lightly. The unusual coldness made Bojio take a step back, her head leaning against the wall. "What is it?" "I'm checking to see if you're better," he said, his fingers caressing her left ear. Bojio thought to herself, how could she admit that she was better now? At the very least she had to wait for the night. She laughed, stretching lazily. "Brother Imo, what did you say? I can't hear you clearly." "I'm not sure." His lips curled up, and that handsome and elegant face came closer to her. When his thin lips parted, she could see that beautiful curve, and he was very leisurely. A kiss landed on the tip of her ear. Bojio's heart trembled. "Hey, the Almighty, this is against the rules." She reached out, wanting to push him away. It wouldn't be good if someone entered. This was the infirmary after all. "What is it?" He pressed her wrist and leaned his lips against her ear. His breath seemed to be able to envelop her completely. "It's not like a kiss can make it better." He was using her words against her again. Bojio interlocked her fingers with his. "This is the infirmary. Did she make herself clear?" "Oh." Qin Imo dragged his voice, his unique voice carrying a hint of elegance. "Our sugar daddy is afraid of being seen too." Bojio pretended to not hear what he was saying. She had to be thorough in her act. Qin Imo chuckled, inching closer. "Do you think it's a coincidence that we're the only ones here?" "Of course not, that's why I have to act sick." "Almighty, you haven't been yourself since the start." Bojio didn't continue the topic. Instead, she reached out and held onto his head with enough strength to fight another round. But in front of the Almighty, she rubbed it lightly, her brows still furrowed. "Are you jealous because of your headache?" Qin Imo stilled, his pupils dilating in an instant. Then he returned to his original state, his smile overflowing. "Compared to a head massage, there's something else that relieves the pain faster." He looked at her. His gaze was as deep as the night outside, causing Bojio to freeze. The next second, the flashlight seemed to have run out of power, and the surroundings were plunged into darkness. Bojio was about to turn on the flashlight, but his aura was already one step closer, pressing down on her. Then he whispered in her ear, "The way you look in the hospital gown makes me want to do something." Before Bojio could open her mouth, he lifted her chin and pressed his lips down. His lips were soft and lingering, carrying the scent of tobacco. It was a light kiss, soft and cool to the touch. It reminded her of peppermint candy. However, the more time passed, the more intense the kiss became. He sucked on the tip of her tongue until it was numb. Their fingers were interlocked, but when Bojio exerted force, he chuckled lowly. After he released her, his lips were still pressed against hers. "Do you like it?" In the night, Qin Imo was like a demon from the deep sea. Even his voice was lazy and sexy, heating her up. On top of that, he was very different today. "I've always wanted to do something like this, even when I close my eyes. As expected, we shouldn't be staying in the same room." That kind of voice, while ringing in her ear at the same time, it lightly pecked the back of her ear. Bojio felt her blood heating up. She moved her left hand, which was interlocked tightly, as though that was the only way to give herself some strength. "Brother Mo, MMH?" Qin Imo didn't intend to let her get up. He followed her wishes and let go of her hand. However, he held onto her wrist and let her wrap her arms around his neck. They sat facing each other. Since Qin Mo's legs were too long, half of them hung down from the side of the bed. But even so, Bojio felt as though she wasn't sitting on the bed, but in the Almighty's arms. They were too close, as though he was using his legs to support a certain area, and she was in that area. "This is weird." Bojio lowered her voice, her breath landing on his shoulder. The dark brown uniform was very seductive. Qin Imo tilted his head, smiling more than usual today. "I want to touch the person I like in my arms. What's so weird about that?" He used the word, touch. "Seriously?" Bojio arched a brow, about to say something. Just then she felt her hospital gown being lifted from the back. Immediately after, a hand slid in, carrying a slight chill. Bojio shivered, her fingers gripping his shirt tightly. "Brother Imo." Qin Imo lowered his voice. "Don't hide, let me know you're really here." Bojio's heart softened. She tilted her head, rubbing her face against his shoulder. 1 minute. They were in the military after all. She hadn't understood before, but now she understood. It wouldn't be good if others found out about it. Bojio didn't care about anything else, she was just worried about how others would view him. Fortunately, the Almighty was cooperative today, replying lazily, "All right, 1 minute." Unfortunately, the minute was longer than she had expected. Besides, she could feel the heat around her rising. It was all because of the Almighty's actions. It wasn't a big deal if his hand was restless. It was just that this person had broken too many rules since he was born. Not only his appearance, but even when you closed your eyes, that voice was as pleasant as the late-night CV of a radio station. After it was softened, it was very magnetic and pleasant to listen to. "Have I ever told you that this part of yours is very beautiful?" Qin Imo spoke, pressing down on her tailbone. The numbness spread uncontrollably throughout her body. She straightened her back instinctively, trying to avoid the touch. Even the corners of her eyes were red, making the mole at the bottom of her eyes seem to be coated with a layer of luster. Qin Mo's gaze deepened. "And your back as well." Under the moonlight, the two figures on the hospital bed could be seen clearly. Especially that pair of hands with jade-like joints. Like an art, they wandered around the young man's fair back. With every word, his fingertips would press down a little. Bojio couldn't even stabilize her breathing. All she could feel were his hands and the rising temperature. Every time he pressed down, she couldn't help but tremble. Chapter 1208. All of a sudden. Bojio's shoulders trembled, her face flushing furiously. "Itchy." "Really? Itchy?" Qin Mo's eyes seemed to be watery under the moonlight. "Is it just itchy?" Even though it was Bojio, she had no choice but to bend her body in his arms. That was probably the only way she could hold on for a minute. Qin Imo felt that she would probably never know that the more she behaved like this, the more he didn't want to leave. It was as though he was possessed. That kind of touch was as smooth as silk, but much softer than silk. It had a good feel, just like the warm jade of ancient times. And the smell on her body. Qin Imo tilted his head, the tip of his nose brushing against her hair, his gaze deepening. Bojio bit her lips. 2 of the buttons on her hospital gown were undone, revealing her exquisite collarbone and slightly round breasts. Her snow-white skin only served to make the temperature hotter in the dark night. She didn't know how the Almighty was feeling. Bojio could only hear her own heartbeat. It was loud. She had never sweated so much before. As her fingers tightened, she unconsciously released her lips. Even her voice was faint and sweet. This minute wasn't a good one for Chinamo, but it seemed like this was the only way he could confirm that she was still there. Bojio calmed her breathing. After looking at Chinamo for a moment, she turned her hand and pressed him onto the bed. Brother Imo, something isn't right. Look at me, aren't I here? MMH? Chinamo raised his hand, his fingertips caressing her face. At the start, she hadn't been pleasing to the eye, but the more he looked at her, the more he liked her. She was still so disobedient. Bojio leaned over with the help of the moonlight. I'm here. Chinamo watched their posture. Are you going to talk to me like this? MMH? Bojio replied before kissing his lips devilishly. You don't have to use any other methods to confirm my presence, I'll just tell you. Chinamo met her eyes. The moonlight shone on her snow-white shoulders, her hospital gown slipping down to her arms. The sight of her made his throat tighten. Idiot. Chinmo's lips parted slightly. He pressed her head against his chest and closed his eyes slowly. Bojio moved her fingers. The low voice came again. My head hurts. Especially when I knew that you were chasing after someone. My head felt like it was going to explode. He did not know why. Bojio felt a sense of grievance when she heard that faint voice in the middle of the night. What about now? Bojio moved upwards, reaching out to hug his head. Chinamo paused. He didn't speak at first, but after a while he said, It's all right. Bojio saw his sexy thin lips and pursed them slightly. Her heart melted from his cuteness. Tsundere. This was the Almighty, just like a little princess. Then let me tell you a story, Brother Imo. When Bojio had been young, she had hoped that one day she would be the one to read him bedtime stories. If not, how would she know her position in the family? Chapter 1209. Bojio. She must have been in a fake relationship, otherwise her dark history wouldn't have been exposed. Not these two. Chinamo continued leisurely, then it's the ancient transmigration dominating the princes and princes? Seriously, it was ruining the atmosphere. Bojio leaned forward, planting a light kiss on his lips. Mmeche was soft. Chinamo laid there, unable to hold it in any longer. He lifted the corners of his lips, trying to suppress the smile in his eyes. He couldn't hide it since he was kissed. Bojio smiled along with him. Inexplicably. This was probably the opposite of himself after falling in love. Her left hand was pulled over, their fingers interlocked. Next they changed their position. He probably felt tired because he wrapped his arm around her back after lying flat, his voice carrying a hint of impatience. Sleep. Bojio felt that she hadn't started to display her talent. Brother Imo, I'm good at telling stories too. Little Bojio. Chinamo opened his eyes, his voice slow. You can choose to tell your story, but I'll make sure you can't get off the bed. Bojio paused, breaking into a smile. It's so hard to endure. Are you asking for a beating? Chinamo placed his chin on the youngster's head, closing his eyes once more, his lashes so long they looked like a silhouette. Bojio couldn't see Chinmo's face, she could only feel his breathing and heartbeat. It wasn't stable, but it was controlled. Even in such a sleeping position, he was still holding onto her hand, but not as forcefully as before, just hugging her naturally. That seemed to be the case. When this man became gentle, he would let you see the entire galaxy. Bojio wanted to tell the story after the mission. It could be used as a proposal. Even though it was a pity that the electronic car was gone, but that was what Bojio was thinking. But when she glanced sideways, she realized that there seemed to be something glowing at the side of his pants pocket. The light was very weak and it must have been in his pocket before, so she couldn't see it. But now it had slipped out. Bojio recognized it immediately. It was her electronic car accessory, the little peach. There were 4 small words written on it. Marry me. Brother Imo. Bojio wanted to say something, but when she turned, she realized that he was really asleep. It was probably because he was too tired that he fell asleep in such a short time. This face always gave people the feeling that when he closed his eyes, he looked like an immortal, but when he opened his eyes, he looked like a demon. It was rare to see a great god so quiet. Bojio reached out and touched his cheek. He seemed to have sensed someone touching him, but the touch was familiar. He didn't wake up, instead he leaned closer to her. Bojio smiled, lowering her voice. Little princess. Even the little princess was hers. Are all people in love the same? Sometimes, even though he knew that it wasn't appropriate to make it public, it wasn't appropriate to do intimate actions. He just wanted to show off to the whole world. This man was hers. But as for the title of Little Princess, when he woke up the next day, the sky outside was still not completely bright. Bojio opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was the Almighty's face and his arched brow. What did you say to me last night? Chapter 12:10. Little Princess? Chinamo smiled. The curve of his lips was higher than ever, but there wasn't any warmth in his voice. Bojio wished it was just a dream. She looked at the Almighty again. He was still handsome, but he was so handsome that it made her feel uneasy. When she woke up, she even stopped yawning. She really wanted to knock herself out so that she could start all over again. You heard wrongly. Bojio replied with a straight face. Brother Imo, I said I like you. Chin Imo pinched her face lightly as though he was praising her. You're really good. With such a good sugar daddy, he definitely wouldn't mind if you put on extra weight when you run. Bojio. He said so much, but in reality she was going to be punished again. Or do you prefer to reflect on your mistakes? Chin Imo expressed his democracy. Bojio arched a brow. If you let me choose, I want to hug you back to sleep. Do you know what I like the most about you? Chin Imo kissed the person in his arms, his fingers caressing her hair gently. Bojio was curious. What is it? I like dreaming. Chin Imo freed his hand and patted the youngster's face, a faint smile on his face. After 7 p.m., go to the training ground and run 10 laps with weights. Bojio felt that the Almighty was using his position to take revenge. Wasn't the nickname Little Princess rather cute and suited to him? Why was he asking her to run again? But 10 laps wasn't much. She could just head to the canteen for her meal after running. That was what Bojio thought at the training ground. But in Prince's eyes it wasn't the case. Brother, I understand you. This was Prince's first sentence. Bojio ignored him. But your brother seems scarier than my uncle. He's the devil. How did he train his aura? Right, did you know that when you were in the forest yesterday he went in alone with a gun? He mobilized the troops from both sides to coordinate with his commands. How much is in that brain of his? It's too heaven-defying. Also, his shooting range was so far away and there was fog in the forest. How did he distinguish the movements of the people? Seriously, are all the children in your family genetically like that? Bojio wanted to remind him to shut up and look behind him. Finally, the figure came closer. Bojio had already given up on reminding him. Instead, she held the mineral water bottle in her hand and moved a meter away from him. Prince seemed to have noticed her actions and was about to say something when Bojio stopped him. Just then, a cold voice came from behind him. What kind of child our family will give birth to is between us. Prince had completely lost his ability to think because of that voice. Otherwise, anyone would be able to understand the rich information that was conveyed in that sentence. For example, Bojio. Even the calm and devilish Bojio almost choked on the water she was drinking. Why did she end up on such a topic? Chapter 12:11. The villain in Prince's heart was still trembling. He had wanted to reach out and grab his roommate so that he could put in a good word for him. However, the moment he turned, he realized that they were so far apart. When did the friendship in the military become so fragile? Chinamo noticed his actions. He lifted the corner of his lips slowly. The chief should have told you not to go to the forest in the future. Have you ever thought about why? Prince was confused. That's right, he wanted to know why his uncle would care about him going to the forest. You have a bright future. Chinamo turned towards Bojio. Now, there's one more person to run with you. Bojio was still drinking the mineral water. Did the Almighty want a child? Prince was starting to feel hopeless. He was a nouveau riche, but now he was going to die in the hands of the devil. Yet, every time he saw him he would feel a sense of fear. Bojio was still deep in thought. Chinamo walked over, his gloved hand taking the mineral water from her hands. Prince had expected to see the devil continue punishing people with a faint smile. Unexpectedly, the devil didn't do anything. Instead, he raised his head and drank a mouthful of water. When Chinamo did this, the sunlight shone down on his face. The curve of his neck was elongated and his throat was glowing. Chinamo was probably the only person who could look so handsome while drinking water. His action had successfully attracted the attention of the hunter who was following him. In that instant he felt as though he was going blind. After his boss finished drinking, he returned the mineral water. He seemed to be acting naturally. Hunter remembered the times when they had trained together. Whenever they got too close to their boss, he would knock their heads. Now they were drinking from the same bottle. Moreover, his boss had brought a glass with him. His boss had gone over because he saw recruit number 10 drinking water. He had even left his own glass at the side. Instead of drinking his premium pu'er, he had gone to drink a cold mineral water. Was it just for an indirect kiss? F***ck. Why did he have to be so smart at such a time? Hunter hugged his head. When their boss was in a relationship, he really didn't care about the feelings of single dogs like them. Prince, who was standing at the side, frowned. Wasn't the devil's actions a little too intimate? Two people drinking a bottle of mineral water? Because they are cousins? Prince wanted to run away immediately. After all, the devil had glanced at him after drinking the water. But before he could take a step, he heard the voice from the other side again. Still have tinnitus? Prince was shocked. Even the devil could speak in such a tone? Bojio took the mineral water and shook her head. She glanced at the bottle in her hand. Did the Almighty finish it? What will she drink later? I'll bring you some water later. Qin Imo tapped her wrist. Continue running. Bojio felt that the moment she looked at his hands, she would be reminded of what had happened last night. She couldn't help blushing, but she couldn't help smiling. Qin Imo had already left. On the other side, Bojio couldn't suppress her laughter. Prince ran towards his roommate. F***ck, your brother treats you well, he even gave you water. But he punished you and then gave you water. What's going on? Bojio tilted her face and ran over. She was extremely handsome. She asked slowly, you haven't been in a relationship before, right? Prince had entered the military at a young age and had trained his muscles. He really hadn't been in a relationship before. But why did she look at him as though he was a senior telling her something? Forget it, a single person like you wouldn't understand. The youngster whistled and continued running. There was a hint of laughter in her voice. Prince, what's the meaning of being ridiculed for no reason? Because of what had happened last night. There would definitely be a lot of meetings. Other than that, the training for the new recruits had added jungle training. Moreover, each of them was wearing a Bluetooth headset, which could not be taken off during normal training. They would roll out of the mud and swiftly pass through the obstacles. They would use their fastest speed to shoot at the moving animals. Under the aerial view of the military plane, the Green Army beneath their feet could be seen. When the troops were tired, they would sing military songs. Even though their faces were stained with mud, when they sang, everyone's voices were very strong. Soldiers didn't know how to entertain themselves. However, being at the border meant that there were limited entertainment options. They couldn't communicate. Even if they made a call, they would only do so during festivals. The more important the mission, the more they couldn't contact their families. In the past, Bojio and these people were separated by a layer of fog. Regardless of how her pet had told her when she was young, she had only vaguely understood. After interacting with them, she finally understood where his self-control and resistance to pressure came from. These soldiers belonged to him. When he wasn't on a mission, he was in charge of their training. When they were on a mission, he carried their lives on his shoulders. Looking at the slender figure standing in the middle of the distance, he turned his head to light a cigarette. Occasionally he would sing a line or two with the soldiers beside him. He still looked noble, but he would joke with his subordinates. When his thin lips curled up, the crimson leaves fell on his military uniform. Yet he could suppress all the colors. Bojio lowered her head. T, she was done for. She was starting to like the Almighty more and more. What should she do? Prince didn't understand why his dorm mate had lowered her head halfway through the song. What's wrong? I'm afraid I'll be impulsive, so I'm suppressing it. Bojio turned her head. She was seated, placing her hands on her knees lazily. Prince was confused. Impulsive? I want my family, Bojio replied mischievously. Prince was scared out of his wits. Was this child's brain damaged from the explosion in the forest? It's a pity, Bojio muttered. Of all the occasions. Prince looked at her gaze and thought that she was talking about him. His expression was one of shock. You don't tell me you've fallen for me? If that's the case, I'll be honest with you. I've been straight my entire life. Goddess ****. In order not to feel awkward during missions in the future, you better give up, okay? Bojio arched a brow and glanced at him. Who gave you that confidence? Who are you referring to? ****, it's worse if it's someone else. Prince lowered his voice, afraid that he would affect the singing. He reached out and pointed. Everyone here is a guy. You said you want your family? ****, you said you want your family. ****, you said you miss your family. Let me tell you, if it's me, I can help you hide it. If it's someone else, you'd better give up. If your brother finds out, he'll definitely break your legs. Let me tell you. As the captain of the small team, Hunter would definitely be standing at the side. It was inevitable that he would hear Prince's words. He couldn't help but look up at the sky. He didn't know if number 10 would get his legs broken by his boss. But he was sure that his boss would definitely break his legs. Child, didn't you notice that when you were whispering to number 10, your boss's gaze swept past you a few times? He felt a chill down his spine as he stood at the side. How did Prince dare to get any closer? Qin Mo's gaze swept over to them. It seemed like his little friend had a good relationship with her roommate. It was really good. Qin Mo smiled. The hunter felt a chill run down his spine as he witnessed the scene with his own eyes. His boss's smile was a little scary. After the singing session, the doctor suggested a report in the morning in order to ease the anxiety of some of the new recruits. It was probably to let them play some games. Physical games weren't something to be underestimated. It was indeed a way to relieve stress. Moreover, there were rewards. Everyone was eager to participate. At this moment, there wasn't a hierarchy. They could be partners. When Prince heard that there was a reward, he turned and asked Bojio, "Do you want to form a team?" Yes. Bojio was someone who had to get a reward. From a certain perspective, it wasn't unreasonable for them to be able to chat so well. The game was simple. Two people's legs were tied and there was a distance of 800 meters between them. The team that reached the other side first would dismantle the gun and reload the gun. The team that used the least time would be the winner. Prince patted his chest. "I'm good at this. Dismantle the gun." Bojio arched a brow. Prince was delighted. "I'm talking about jumping with one leg. Didn't I tell you that I'm good at everything? When we have holidays, I'll bring you to play online games. Then you'll know that I'm better than most people in terms of gaming." Bojio arched a brow, replying slowly, "If you're on the other side, I'll play with you." What? Prince didn't understand. When the youngster bent down, her black hair covered her fringe. Her long fingers caressed the rope, her tone indifferent. "That way I can send you back to the blood pool." Prince was a little slow before he understood what she meant. "Hey, we're teammates, don't you understand? Teammates should be..." He didn't manage to say the word love. That familiar tall figure appeared again. This time, Prince told himself not to hold it in. This was a game and he was having a normal conversation with his teammate. "That's right, hold it in." Bojio lowered her head, tying the rope around her legs. Suddenly, a pair of hands appeared in front of her. They were long and fair with jade-like joints. The hands hooked onto the other end of the rope. It was a beautiful knot, fast and orderly. Bojio glanced up. She saw Qin Mo bending down just like her. With the rope tied around her ankles, the distance between them wouldn't be far. If her chin was just a little closer, she would be able to touch his black hair. He smelled good, a unique tobacco scent. Most importantly, because everyone was doing the same thing. Therefore, even if they did this, no one would notice. Of course, that was except for Prince, who couldn't describe his emotions. If he was not mistaken, the great demon king had just taken the rope that belonged to him, right? After Qin Mo was done tying his own, he turned and tied the ankle of the youngster who had paused. "We'll be in the same group." It was a very light sentence and the voice sounded very normal. Bojio glanced at her roommate. She felt that it was better to mention him. "Prince? He's playing as well?" As Qin Mo spoke, he glanced in Prince's direction. There wasn't any emotion in between his brows. It was just an indifferent glance, and even the corners of his eyes were curved. But the coldness in his eyes allowed Prince to understand the warning. He hurriedly expressed his stance, his tone sincere. No, I'm not interested in such games." Qin Mo chuckled. He turned towards Bojio. "Did you hear that?" What else could Bojio say? She couldn't understand why her roommate had changed so quickly. Prince watched the two of them. His heart was thumping furiously. He was scared out of his wits. He could still feel the lingering warmth of the devil. He took another step back and turned towards his captain. "Who should I be in the same group?" Hunter finally found a chance to talk to his subordinate. "Anyone is fine as long as it isn't number 10. With that, he reached out and patted Prince's shoulder. Prince muttered, "You can't blame me. I just realized that the devil is obsessed with his brother." Hunter. On the other side, the two of them were still stretching. It was a normal stretch, but the Almighty's movements were much better than hers. Bojio glanced at him and suddenly felt that his height was a huge disadvantage. "What is it?" Qin Mo seemed to have sensed her gaze as he tilted his head over. Bojio asked, "Do the troops sell milk?" Not at the moment, Chinamo replied casually. Do you think you're short? Bojio smiled. I'm not short. Based on the length of your legs, your speed won't be too fast. Chinamo replied leisurely, short legs. Bojio. She wanted to give the Almighty a beating. It was as though she could see their future. Novels were indeed lies. How could a sharp-tongued man improve after falling in love? How had the Almighty changed? He was still so arrogant that she wanted to challenge him. Don't pout. Chinamo glanced at the youngster, his voice coming over again. Makes me want to kiss you. The sudden flirtation. Bojio arched a brow. Based on the length of your legs, kissing isn't convenient. 12 centimeters, the golden height for kissing. What's the inconvenience? Chinamo reached out to put on the wrist guard. He glanced up at her. It's probably because my legs are short. Bojio handed her wrist over, a smile on her face. She realized that the Almighty was the one who had helped her put on everything she owned. At this point, it seemed like something a boyfriend would do. Chinamo chuckled lightly as he helped the youngster put on the wrist guard. They spoke softly. It was a rare moment of intimacy. It was a pity it wasn't long, just a few sentences. The Almighty was too eye-catching. Even though they were wearing the same training uniform, many people still noticed him because of his face. Captain Qin is participating too? It can't be? What's the point? Captain Qin will definitely win. I thought Captain Qin didn't participate in such activities in the past? Cries of anguish rang out from all directions. Bojio glanced over, lowering her voice. Brother Imo, why didn't you participate in such games in the past? In the past. Chinamo stuffed a hand into his pocket. He stood tall, his voice unhurried. I'm not with my girlfriend, why should I participate? What he meant was that he was participating this time to accompany his girlfriend. Bojio paused, her face burning. She shook her ankle and glanced at the person beside her. In the end, she raised her hand to press the stray hair on her forehead. From the side, the youngster looked helplessly handsome. She exhaled deeply. Brother Imo, I won't be able to control myself if you continue saying such things. Hurry and shut up. Chinamo laughed. He wanted to reach out to pinch her face, but when he realized there was someone beside him, he tightened his grip in his pocket. The cries continued. Someone walked over and said to Chinamo, Captain Qin, you aren't giving us any chance to win. Didn't you say that entertainment is the main priority? If you want to dismantle a gun, we can't be faster than you. Back then, Chinmo's dismantling technique had been used as a video material in the military. A large number of people had learned how to dismantle a gun. His speed had been the ultimate goal of training. At that time, when they had seen those hands, there had only been one thought in their minds. That was too fast. It was indeed fast. They didn't even have the energy to look at the pair of hands. Until the dismantling was completed and the video froze. They lowered their heads instinctively to look at their hands. They suspected that the person in the video was a soldier. His hands should be playing the piano. Now that they had seen this person, his face was harder to describe than his hands. Was the devil from the art team? The more they understood him, the more they realized how amazing he was. He was too amazing. It wasn't because of his rank as a major general. It was because of the aura he exuded and his ability to command and fight on the spot. There were many soldiers in their group who were conferred the title of the King of Soldiers. But in front of this person, they had all worn down some of the things they had brought from their original unit. After seeing the devil, they understood one thing. In the future, there were two things they needed to do for overseas missions. 1. Never forget that they were a soldier of China. 2. Never reveal their identity as a soldier of China. Unless they had obtained permission from the higher-ups. On this point, the entire operation team was very consistent. Even though they were already in this unit until now, they still didn't know what missions Captain Qin and the others had carried out. This was the difference between overseas missions and domestic missions. Perhaps after many years, when the events had passed for a long time, some of the heroes would gradually be known by people. Even the sacrifice would be the same. But there were still people who chose to carry out such missions. The devil standing in front of them was such a person. Many times we thought we already knew all the heroes. But in reality, the real heroes wouldn't even be announced. Chapter 12:12. Instantly, everyone's gazes were focused on Bojio's face. Bojio didn't say anything, she flicked the rope around her ankle, her lips moving slightly. All right. It was a single word, languid, but it was very straightforward. Then we won't be afraid. Noisy noises rang out again. After knowing that Chinamo was participating, The group of burly men's goal changed from getting the prize to reaching their destination before their boss. After all, they were newbies just like number 10. Their speed was similar. The difference in time was probably on the road. It wasn't just them, even Hunter was raring to go. Wolf swept him a glance but didn't say a word. Magician tilted his head. Trust me, you'll be tortured badly. Boss isn't going to make a move. Are you implying that I will lose to a newbie? Hunter wasn't convinced. Wolf didn't speak, but the moment he did, it was a stab to his heart. You have already lost to number 10 once, no, twice. Hunter froze on the spot. He didn't even know about his dark history. Wolf, serves you right for not being able to find a girlfriend. Magician patted his shoulder, his words hitting the nail on the head. Would boss participate in something he isn't confident about? Hunter retracted his leg, which was about to form a team. Thus, the Crown Prince was once again abandoned. This was the first time he felt that life in the military wasn't so friendly. He just wanted to form a team and get an award. Why was it so difficult? All the games for the competition had been prepared. There would be 20 teams set off at once and the winner would be decided by the timer. Bojio and the Almighty were in the first batch. Basically, the entire military was pinning their hopes on the other 19 teams. Their slogan was, "Don't let Team Qin advance." Chinamo was nonchalant, stuffing a hand into his pocket. He glanced over and leaned over, whispering into Bojio's ear, "This time I can only let my girlfriend lead me to victory." His voice was low, the others couldn't hear him but Bojio was close enough to hear him clearly. She coughed lightly but didn't say anything. Chinamo raised his eyebrows. He wanted to say something, but when he saw the faint smile on her lips when she lowered her lids, he smiled too. There was no physical contact between the two of them, nor was there any eye contact. One of them was looking up at the sky, while the other was doing the final touches with his eyes lowered. Yet even so, the scene exuded a sweet fragrance. Perhaps it was because the two of them were good-looking. When they smiled, one could feel the faint throbbing of a young girl's heart. The other teams thought that boss was giving number 10 some kind of strategy. Everyone was very nervous. After all, even if the boss didn't personally make a move, he still had to be on guard against him. Everyone in position. On the side of the road, the person in charge of firing the gun raised the pistol in his hand. The 19 teams collectively stood on the line to advance. They gave it their all because they felt that they couldn't be careless when facing the boss. Only Bojio's deep gaze swept past the road, landing on the finishing line not far away. The moment he heard the sound, all the squads rushed out. Bojio and the others were no exception. But the method that the two of them used was obviously beyond the predictions of the other teams. They didn't know how they were overtaken, but the two figures had already swept past them. The squads that were overtaken widened their eyes. After a moment of daze, they hurriedly followed. But it was too fast. Rather than calling it fast, it was more like a form of tacit understanding that had been formed for a long time. But how could the two of them have such tacit understanding? Just as everyone was filled with questions. The youngster's body tilted to the left, avoiding the obstacle at the side. Many of them forgot about the hidden trap at their feet when they wanted to speed up. Up until now, the 20 teams had basically been divided into 3 groups based on speed. Bojio's position wasn't very advantageous. The slower teams would definitely block their vision. But every time they took a precise step forward, they would land on the same spot. When Bojio took a step forward with her left leg, Chinamo took a step forward with his right leg. It was as though the thread that was tied to their legs didn't exist. But this time, the goal of the other teams was to prevent their boss from winning. Hence, everyone would definitely think of a way to stop Chinamo and Bojio. For example, blocking their line of sight. In such a competition where time was measured by seconds and minutes, it was crucial. Even Hunter felt that their boss's team was in danger. Unexpectedly, when he glanced sideways, he saw Ten's eyes. They were extremely dark, completely different from the youngster's usual appearance. His gaze was extremely serious, just like a wolf, his eyes reflecting every movement around him. The youngster frowned, probably because he couldn't find a way out. The next second, her waist was hugged. Bojio felt as though she was lifted into the air. When her chin touched the Almighty's chest, her heart skipped a beat. Hunter and the others were dumbfounded. What was going on? Hug, hug, hug. In front of so many people. It was indeed a hug. It was still Chinamo, but he was faster. The moment he lifted Bojio up to avoid the blind spot, he placed her down the next second. But he didn't remove his hand from her waist. The next moment, the Almighty used his height and long legs to catch up to the other 5 teams. Bojio could still smell his scent. She mimicked him and hugged his waist. The soldiers didn't think much of it. They only said, F***ck boss is really willing to do anything to win. Hunter and Magician glanced at each other before glancing up. Boss definitely didn't do it just to win. Was there a need to hug him just now? He could have used other methods to avoid it. Boss didn't need to reveal his masculinity, he was doing it on purpose. The others who were fixated on winning wouldn't be able to see it. 3 teams had reached the finish line. Now they just needed to dismantle and reassemble the guns. Boss wasn't here yet, they were likely to win. Everyone lowered their heads and looked at the guns in their hands. The most important thing when disassembling a gun was to familiarize yourself with the model of the gun. Only then would you know how to disassemble it and reassemble it in the shortest time possible. Team 1 had a professional in charge of this aspect. The other couldn't speak and could only watch from the side. 3 seconds after the 3 teams reached the finish line. Kacha. Chapter 12-13. When that sound was heard, it meant that Bojio's team had fallen behind. The people standing at the side felt that they were close to winning. After all, disassembling and assembling a gun was a battle of time. Once their boss's team fell behind, it would be hard for them to catch up. But in the next second they were completely stunned. It was because of what the youngster had done after reaching her goal. That youngster didn't even look at the gun. Instead, she picked up the gun from the table and disassembled it. Her tilted face and tall nose made her look mysterious. For some reason, that was the feeling that the recruits had in that instant. They were stunned. She didn't even look at the gun and disassembled it? Some of the veterans didn't have such a huge reaction. After all, they couldn't rule out the possibility that this was the model that the youngster was used to. This number 10 was from the army. It wasn't strange that he would come into contact with old guns like the 77. But very quickly that thought disappeared. It was because of the youngster's hand speed. The moment her slender fingers moved, they couldn't even see where they landed. It was like a shadow flashing by. This really shocked them a little. How familiar was she with a gun to be able to do that? Was the army already so strong? In reality, Bojio's background meant that she had been exposed to these things since she was young. When she was young, there was nothing she didn't dismantle. Computers, televisions, toy cars, little keyboards, and all sorts of imitation guns. Click. That was the first sound. The youngster's thumb pressed on the button of the magazine and removed the magazine. Next, Bojio pulled the sleeve, setting the gun in a firing mode. Then she turned the safety lever to a vertical position and pulled the sleeve to the final position. Only 2 seconds had passed while she was doing all this. It was true that no one could see her movements clearly until she lifted the rear end up so that the sleeve and socket were separated from the socket seat guide. The recruits standing at the side watched with their mouths agape. That was too fast. Bojio didn't stop. There was another sound. She had removed the sleeve, the recoil spring, and the barrel. This meant that she had made it in time. Next was the assembly. The other team wasn't slow either. In fact, they were slightly faster than Bojio, taking about 2 seconds to catch up. These 2 seconds weren't to be underestimated. When disassembling a gun, they had to fight for this time. But when they started to assemble the gun, someone suddenly discovered a problem. Recruit number 10 is left-handed? No, it doesn't look like it. This person is very strong with both hands. Yes, Bojio unleashed her full potential. She moved her hands together. When assembling a gun, although other people could use both hands, there was always one that was more important. Bojio did it at the same time. There was a 2-second time difference. There was a difference of 1 second. Both of them pushed their guns forward at the same time, completely leveling the number on the second hand. Everyone's eyes were drawn to the timer. Their hearts were beating faster because of such an entertaining game. In the next second, the gun barrel was pushed forward, and the assembly was complete. A reversal. Ever since the start, Prince's gaze hadn't left the timer. When the timer stopped, his eyes widened. F***ck. The next second, he opened his arms and ran towards her. It was 2F***king amazing. Chapter 12-14. Before Prince could express his joy, a tall and slender figure appeared in front of him. It wasn't his roommate's waist size. F***ck, what exactly was he hugging? F***ck, what exactly was he hugging? Why was it so hot? His scalp felt cold. He couldn't be hugging a snake, could he? Raising her head, she saw a pair of eyes that were as cold as ice, as well as the arc of a smile that wasn't a smile. In that instant, Prince released his hand. The devil? I don't like people touching me. With that, Chinamo glanced up. I can't control you, Prince. It's better to hand it over to the old general. *CK. No, he would rather be controlled by the devil. Prince reached out, wanting to stop him, but Chinamo didn't give him the chance. Take him away. Hunter and Exorcist watched from the side, acting as though they didn't see anything. After all, there weren't many people who wanted to court death. Why didn't he open his arms to hug number 10? Which part of him wasn't worthy of a death sentence? Seriously, the youngster was still too young. Prince turned to look at his roommate for help. He signaled with all his might with his eyes, telling him to beg his brother not to send him to his uncle's place. The youngster walked towards him and asked, "Did you carry the boss with that hand?" Prince thought to himself, "I want to hug you and celebrate your victory." Bojio arched a brow and repeated, "Which hand?" Prince was stunned by the aura. He raised both his hands in the air. Bojio scoffed and turned to report, "Captain Chin, I suggest the old general to teach my roommate some etiquette. His hands can be punished at the right time." Prince. No, this wasn't what he had imagined. Was his roommate such a disloyal person? It was fine if he didn't help him, but why did he give such a suggestion? What did he do wrong just now? He had hugged the devil's waist by mistake. Wait a minute. Don't tell me that you're jealous because I hugged your brother? *CK sugar daddy. How old are you? You should be an adult, right? Why are you so jealous? Prince tried to defend himself. Bojio tilted her head and smiled. I'm possessive, especially towards my brother. The conversation between the two could not be heard by others. Even Hunter and the rest could only see Prince being dragged away with a sickly expression. They didn't know what number 10 had said to him. Magician, on the other hand, noticed something. Their boss seemed to be in a particularly good mood. Just a moment ago, there was a chill in the corners of his eyes. Now, not only was he completely gone, but the corners of his lips were even curled up. He lowered his gaze, not knowing what number 10 was saying. In reality, Bojio had only said one sentence. My girlfriend won without doing anything. Should I call Almighty Z666? Chinamo lowered his voice, sounding magnetic and gentle. Bojio chuckled. Keep a low profile, there are many people around. Even handsome and skilled almighties like us have to hide our identities. Oh, Chinamo replied, raising his tone slightly. Then he changed the topic casually. Why is Prince always trying to get close to you? Bojio caressed her nose. He's my roommate, we're close. I remember I'm your roommate now. Chinmo's tone was unhurried. Magician, who was walking over, started to get excited when he heard this. Was his boss going to fight for the title of roommate? It was just a relationship, did he have to be so crazy? Also, could the two of them not be so obvious about whispering to each other whenever they had the chance? Magician placed his hand by his lips and coughed. Boss, the results are out. You have to hand out the reward to the winning team. Okay. Chinamo retracted his gaze, walking towards Magician. His back view didn't change at all, standing tall and noble. The timer at the side was still fixed at 1. In fact, after Bojio's beautiful moves, they had already predicted who would win. No one was dissatisfied with this game, including some of the veterans. After all, there weren't many who could match up to her speed. The others weren't slow either, breaking the previous record for recruits. The old general watched from afar, his face filled with gratification. The recruits this year are all very strong. Yes. The adjutant wanted to tell the old general that Prince was here. But when he thought about Prince's suicidal actions, he decided to let the old general be happy first. But just as the old general had said, the recruits this year were indeed strong, especially number 10. That was why it was troublesome. How were they going to make number 10 stay? Especially tomorrow morning? The adjutant glanced up, his gaze landing on the major general standing in the middle of the group of soldiers. Regardless of how many people there were, he would always be the most eye-catching one. The wind blew past. The troops at the border were all in a natural environment. Sometimes there would be the scent of plants mixed in with the wind. It smelled good, accompanied by the cool temperature. Everything seemed so aloof. As the winning contestant, Bojio walked towards Chinamo after her number was called. The sunlight shone on her face, stretching her shadow. Many were wondering what the reward would be. After all, it was the hair of the great demon. Curiosity was the biggest factor. Everyone sat on the ground to rest. Even when resting in the troops, they would be in formation. Only the two of them were surrounded in the middle. Chinamo didn't change out of his battle uniform, which made his eyes look even deeper, like a boundless sea, with all the afterglow shining into it. Bojio arched a brow, not understanding what was going on. She watched as the man reached out his hand. His slender and beautiful knuckles tilted his body slightly. When the faint scent of mint and tobacco wafted over, he buckled something onto her combat uniform. That thing shone with a beautiful light, like diamonds falling from the Milky Way. It was indescribably low-key. It was a mark. Hunter and magician who were standing at the side hadn't expected their boss to give them the mark of a major general. The doctor was stunned. This mark meant more to their boss than anything else. Ever since that mission he had been given the title of Major General and sent back to Jianghu City. But now he had given the highest honor to the other party. Was he trying to say that she was more important than all his honors? Chapter 12:15. Bojio paused when she touched the symbol. When she raised her eyes, the first thing she saw was that person's beautiful jawline. The curve of the corner of his mouth faintly curved upwards. His face was noble and abstinent, and when he looked at her, he still had an indifferent expression. She thought that would be the end. Unexpectedly, Chinamo opened his arms and leaned forward to give her a hug. Then he said, "I hope you can become an outstanding soldier in the People's Liberation Army and protect the people you want to protect." The hug ended as quickly as it came. The onlookers didn't think much of it. At most, it was because of her outstanding performance. But when Bojio stood there and looked at the person in front of her heart seemed to be filled with something. Her fingers caressed the symbol on the uniform, even her palms were burning. Countless cheers rang in her ears. It was as though they had graduated. The training period was indeed coming to an end. Tomorrow was the last day. After tomorrow they would either go on a mission or return to their original unit. In order to pass the test with overall results. That day it was the 5th time Bojio opened and folded the blanket. She continued until night time. Chinamo came back after the meeting. He leaned against the door frame and watched her for a few seconds. Then he walked over and pressed her hand on the military blanket. "Press here." After guiding her, Chinamo didn't stay any longer. He pinched her face. "What do you want to eat?" "Me." Bojio smiled lazily, leaning over to ask for a kiss. Chinamo reached out and pushed her away. "I'm sweaty, I'm going to take a shower." "All right." She didn't manage to kiss him, but she would be able to admire the handsome man in the shower later. "That wasn't bad." Bojio whistled. Chinamo chuckled. He pushed open the bathroom door and turned on the shower. Then he pressed down on his Bluetooth earpiece. "At 1 a.m. Team A will set off. Gather the people at the last minute. Be quiet and quick." "Yes." "Yes." "Got it." A few sounds were heard. Chinamo threw his uniform to the side. He stood tall and straight under the shower head. After his black hair was wet, the steam rose into the air. Chinmo's shower was longer than usual, probably because he had something on his mind. When he came out, he saw the young man sitting on a wooden chair with his head lowered, fiddling with something. His waistline was elongated and his fair skin was somewhat alluring. Chinamo paused for a moment. When he walked over, he reached out and held her waist. Bojio stilled for 2 seconds and was about to speak. Chinamo was 1 step ahead of her. He pulled her back and placed her on the bed. "What are you doing?" The voice was very close and even the breath was close. The scent of the shower gel and the faint scent of mint hit her face as he moved. Bojio avoided the irresistible breath, unable to control her heartbeat. "I'm returning the favor." "What did you want to give me previously?" Chinmo's fingers touched her lips. Bojio tried her best to ignore the numbness. The moment the words "electronic car" left her mouth. His hand had already reached under her clothes, the warmth of his palm burning the girl's fair skin. Bojio trembled, her eyes widening. The numbness was too sudden, passing through her tailbone and spreading to her limbs. Outside, they were in the military after all. Bojio had to be cautious. "There's no one." When Chinamo said this, he lowered his head and kissed her lips. The sweet breath in his nose made his gaze deepen. Bojio closed her eyes, her trembling lashes tinged with red. It was as though fireworks had exploded in her mind. Her mind couldn't think of anything else. It was as though her body would burn the moment she heard his breathing. He would stop at this moment every time. After all, the location wasn't right. But today he didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Bojio opened her eyes in the darkness, pressing his hand. "Brother Imo, we're in the military. The military allows us to consummate our marriage." He looked at her, his eyes as dark as the night. When her waist was held, the youngster's neck stretched out. Perhaps she didn't realize how alluring she was. But in Chinmo's eyes he couldn't control himself anymore. He reached his hand in again, the youngster's uniform rolled to the perfect position. The smooth skin under his palm made it impossible for him to retract his hand. He couldn't help but pull her back. In that instant, Bojio could only hear her own heartbeat. It was deafening. Her body temperature had long gone out of control. In the end, he carried her up, rubbing her until her entire body softened, a certain part of her body turning numb. The wind outside surged in, blowing the curtains. In the darkness, the temperature continued to rise without anyone noticing. On the other side, Prince couldn't understand why he was made to stay. He had never seen his uncle in such a manner, looking at him with a gaze filled with pride and something else. "You've passed the test." That was the old general's first sentence. Prince was stunned for a second before jumping up. "That's not right, isn't there an overall score tomorrow? Did you really think that you were chosen randomly?" The old general glanced at his nephew. "Before you came in, the assessment period had already begun. Tomorrow's comprehensive score is just a cover for the start of this operation." Prince patted his head. "Uncle, wait, let me think." "There's no need to think." Wolf walked in from outside, his gaze faint. Prince thought he would give him a reason. Wolf only replied, "You won't be able to think it through." "Prince, did I pass the test myself?" Prince asked in a roundabout manner. Wolf glanced at him. "There are a few more," each of them was informed individually. "Now that you know, pack up and follow me to the gathering point." When Prince heard this, he didn't have to worry anymore. Since there were only a few people, Little Hay would definitely be one of them. Time trickled by slowly. As the night deepened, the troops fell into a slight silence. The chirping of the insects came one after another. The cold moonlight shone on the side of the bed. Chinamo was bending over, one knee on the ground, his fingers caressing a certain someone's face. Then he leaned over. His kiss was light, leaving almost no traces. Chapter 12:16. The darkness of the night grew thicker. In the ungoverned area thousands of miles away, Kawang's eyes dimmed. Almost everyone knew that the mercenaries were supposed to be back at this time, but they hadn't returned. They couldn't even contact them. Very quickly, Kawang found the answer. The other party had purposely given him this answer, because the only place with internet access was the fact that his underlings had been captured alive by the Chinese soldiers. In their world, being captured alive was more humiliating than being shot dead. That wasn't all. The news that came back made Kawang's face sink. The entertainment industry's suppression and regulation made it more difficult for them to sell their goods. In addition, there was the phone call he had just received. "Kawang, seriously, it's not that I don't want to take your goods, but the limelight is too tight. You should do it yourself." The biggest supplier had stopped working with them. This made Kawang narrow his eyes. That person also said to him, "I think you've been targeted by the people over there. Do you want to find a way to hide?" "What?" Kawang only said one word before ending the call. He smiled slowly and raised his hand, smashing the phone onto the ground, shattering into pieces. A faint blood-red color appeared in his eyes. Coupled with the white coat he was wearing, it would only make people feel a chill from the bottom of their hearts. He glanced up at the people beside him. "Do you think I, Kawang, need to hide?" Of course not. It wasn't just that he didn't need to. If those people wanted to find him, it wouldn't be easy for them to do so. Looking around, no one could catch Kawang. "Fanjia, make a trip to the school and organize an adventure. Get them to collect the prize money I've prepared for them." Kawang glanced down at his white-gloved hands. Fanjia chuckled lightly. "Master, you don't have to go through so much trouble. Even if there's no prize money, they will come just by saying that it's an adventure. It's true that there's a prize money." Kawang placed his hands down. "The more foolish a person is, the more attention they will get. Which person doesn't want attention now? The more attention they get, the more satisfaction they will get. Remember, even though a pretty flower can control people, spiritual food can easily captivate them. As long as you can get them attention, they won't care if they snatch other people's things. Make use of this and you will be able to control them. I'll wait here for you." Fanjia knew this was her last chance to prove herself. She couldn't find the useless person no matter how hard she tried. Hence, she could only act at the school. Speaking of which, the Chinese soldiers are really stupid. Before they even take action, we already have enough people to negotiate with them. Fanjia said this to make Kawang feel better. Kawang paused. "Compared to that, I'm more interested in who killed the people I sent. Can't you find out?" Fanjia's first reaction was to find an excuse. China's defense system isn't easy to infiltrate. Moreover, they were in an uninhabited area. Be it the data or the electronic map, there are only empty lands and villages. There aren't any traces of troops or China's checkpoints. Forget it, Kuang interrupted her. Compared to your brother, you are still lacking. Fan Jia clenched her fists but didn't dare to say anything. In reality, Fan Jia wasn't the hacker Kuang wanted. He had tried to collaborate with Z 3 times. Unfortunately, people with different goals couldn't work together. Z was similar to Qin Mo in his eyes. He could have been more outstanding, but he was completely tied down by some unimportant things. What did people want? The two of them should feel the same way as him. Even the Bible had a detailed description of it. It was human nature to be selfish. There had been soldiers from China who had looked for him. Which time had he been able to go back? This time he didn't even wait for them to move, killing them directly. That was Kuang's thought. However, an hour ago. That meant it was 1:37 a.m. and 40 seconds in China time. The members of the operation team gathered at one point from all directions. It was late at night. This time they weren't wearing the Chinese battle uniform. Instead they were dressed in black. Their masks, gloves, and even their backpacks were all black. This meant that they weren't allowed to leave their names behind for this mission. But that wasn't what Prince was concerned about. Why wasn't there a black youngster in the team? He widened his eyes in confusion and wanted to ask a question, but was pulled back by Wolf Fong. At this moment, Prince finally saw the tall and slender figure. He seemed to have arrived earlier than them. He stood under the military plane with one hand stuffed into his pocket. His black hair was messy and cold from the wind from the propeller. "Are you ready?" This was the first thing he said, and it sounded like a normal military drill. But everyone knew this wasn't a military drill. They were really going to take action. "Reporting, we're ready." Prince listened to the voices around him. For some reason his chest felt warm. He wanted to ask Little Blackie where he was. Why wasn't Little Blackie around when there was a stranger? He had always assumed that they would be working together. Qin Mo's dark gaze shifted over, his voice calm as he asked, "What about you?" Prince opened his mouth, feeling the pressure. Qin Mo didn't seem to have the time to look at him. He turned and opened the cabin door. With a swoosh, his tall and slender silhouette seemed to blend in with the moonlight against the backdrop of the military plane. His nobility didn't diminish. "If you're not ready, go back." Prince heard him, pressing his heels together. "Reporting, I'm ready." Then board the plane. The order was not mandatory, but it invisibly made people want to obey it. Other than the 8 of us here, no one else will know the details of this mission. The confidentiality level is S, Qin Mo said as he picked up the rifle on the ground. Qin Mo picked up the rifle on the ground. "Since we are entering another country, we will dismantle all your guns and insert the parts into the camouflage tools." With that, Qin Mo paused. "Hunter. Here. Take off." "Yes." Did that mean that even the pilot was a member of the team? In that instant, Prince felt different. Indeed, he had gone on missions in the past, but there would be a designated pilot to place him at the designated location. But this time they had no idea what they were going to face. Chapter 12:17. He pushed the small computer to the side. "I'm Fatty, you can call me Almighty Fatty or Brother Fatty. Anyway, I'm asking you to introduce the equipment and events." Qin Mo glanced over, his gaze indifferent. Fatty's scalp went numb and he didn't dare to spout nonsense anymore. With a dignified expression, he continued the previous topic. "Just as boss said, from now on, all of you will have a wireless communication device on your hands. No matter what happens, don't remove it. Make sure that it doesn't leave your side for 24 hours. Other than that, during the mission, there's a high chance that communication won't work. When you encounter such a situation, activate the chip's destruction button, and we can use the signal to find the last place you were seen. Now, everyone can see a video that's less than 50 seconds long on your watch. This video is the reason why we're carrying out this overseas mission." Prince lowered his head, his eyes widening as the video played. In the end, they deepened and he clenched his fists. Fatty added, "The organization you are seeing now is active in the ungoverned area of the MT region. They provide the goods for most of the transactions within the country. Of course, this isn't the most important. The most important thing is the leader of the organization, Kuang. He is a serial killer wanted internationally. The scariest thing about him is that he has 2 degrees and is an expert in psychological crimes. Once someone is affected by his hypnosis, their personality will change drastically. A year ago, his students established the organization. That year, I'm sure you all felt it. A large-scale rescue mission was carried out because a school near the border was implicated. The students were rescued, but a while ago, we received a piece of news. After saying that, the fatty paused for a moment. His eyes looked toward the recruits sitting there. Back then, after being hypnotized by the doctors, out of the 10 students who were cured, 7 of them chose this school when they returned to school. Fatty moved his finger, drawing a dot on the information. Foam County No. 1 Middle School. This information was also sent by boss. The statistics were just completed 2 days ago, and to a certain extent, this tells us that the hypnosis from back then wasn't cured. Kawang had planned this long ago. He wanted history to repeat itself. Prince opened his mouth. History repeating itself? What do you mean? Let us deal with these students. Fatty lifted his lids and looked at Prince. They aren't just hostages that we have to save. If the situation is too bad, they might hinder our actions to a certain extent. But we still have to save them. Prince still didn't understand. How is it possible that they would stop us from saving them? What do you think hypnosis is? Suddenly, the person in the auxiliary cabin looked over. He was wearing a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. Only then did Prince realize that the person in the auxiliary cabin was actually a doctor from the infirmary. Even the doctors were part of the action team? None of the recruits had thought of this. After all, in their eyes, the doctor had never participated in training, and he looked so gentle that he didn't look like the kind of person who could go on missions abroad. There was only one word that people could think of: harmless. Chapter 12:18. He took a closer look. Among the people sitting there were a few who seemed to be soldiers who had gone on a mission outside the country. Prince glanced at himself before turning to look at Fatty, who was fiddling with the electronic equipment. In the end, his gaze landed on Chin Imo. Chin Imo seemed to have entered the wrong profession. Could it be? Suddenly, Prince seemed to have figured something out. Could this be the reason why they were chosen? He suddenly recalled his uncle's words. They weren't chosen randomly, it was just that after some observation they weren't sure. At this moment, Prince finally understood why the doctor would talk to them after every training session. Was he investigating their psychological data? Don't underestimate Kawang's hypnosis, the doctor said. The doctor spoke again. Every case he handled, he didn't even need to do it himself, and he could kill someone. Do you understand why? It's because of psychological influence. There are many types of psychological influence, such as sound, image, words. You should have learned from the textbook cases. The biggest crime scene was when the murderer used the beat of a drum and rhythm to make everyone imagine certain scenes. Their emotions were affected, causing them to be extremely irritable. Then a huge stampede occurred. This case was a short-term psychological influence, while Kawang's was a long-term one. Regardless of whether it was Kawang or his former students, they knew what kind of people were most susceptible to psychological influence. Selfish, imperfect values, easily swayed by the wind, and they even needed attention from others. Prince's heart sank as he listened. You mean, the meaning of the letters? Chin Imo glanced up, his voice faint. Some high school students are like this. Is it hard to accept? Prince nodded after a moment. He had a cousin. Even though he had wanted to drag him over and give him a good beating the moment he saw him, he felt uncomfortable when he heard Chin Imo's words. Chin Imo tilted his head, the corners of his face sharp. Do you think they are children? It wasn't just Prince's voice, the other 2 recruits did as well. Chin Imo fixed the parts. When carrying out a mission, they are more dangerous than mercenaries. Do you know why? The 3 of them shook their heads. Chin Imo's gaze deepened. Because no one has their guard up against them. They think they are young and wouldn't harm others. You aren't him, you don't understand his background or his thoughts. You also don't know what Kawang said to them. That isn't important, what's important is a person's appearance. What has it got to do with age? A person's growth is related to their environment and heart. Some people are born selfish. As long as they could attract the attention of others, they didn't care if they harmed others when they were doing it. They needed this kind of attention. The younger a person was, the more unrestrained he was, and the more unscrupulous he was. It was true that the strong bullied the weak in this world, but what was the scariest was that he was poor, young, and didn't know anything, so if he made a mistake he had to be forgiven. If he didn't forgive him, he would be overbearing. Even if he killed someone, he would be the most pitiful one. You had to face such a child. If such a child turned around and stabbed you after you saved him, how would you deal with him then? Prince's back trembled. He didn't know how to reply. Chapter 12:19. Prince sat up straight. Isn't that a little too scary? He couldn't agree with the devil on certain points. He really couldn't agree with him. He was still siding with his cousin. Chinamo leaned back looking nonchalant. You can experience it once. Prince turned to look at the doctor. He needed counseling now. The doctor smiled. This time it won't happen again. That's why we have to take action. Before Kawang activates the seeds, we have to destroy Kawang's nest. Prince knew how to grasp the main point. That means the situation boss mentioned happened? Can you tell me who carried out the mission? He wanted to worship the Almighty. I can't. The doctor turned to glance at Chinamo, who had already closed his eyes. Perhaps no one knew. In reality, even those who participated in the mission didn't know what had happened. Their boss was the one who had climbed out of hell. Even until now. The doctor closed his eyes, recalling the scene of that day. It was just 6 or 7 high school students. But it seemed to be able to shatter one's understanding of the world. They had carried out many missions. Regardless of how vicious the criminals were. The doctor had never thought of retreating. But at that time he had hesitated. He had personally witnessed his comrade being betrayed to the organization by a high school student he had saved. If it hadn't been for the high school student, his comrade wouldn't have been exposed. At that time he had also been a member of the undercover team. At that time he had been in a daze. He had been in so much pain when he bent over. He hadn't understood what he had been protecting. Who had come to rescue him? Was it these people? These people were wrapped in innocent skin, but their hearts had long since been rotten from the bottom of their hearts? He had almost been exposed in front of others as well. If his boss hadn't appeared, he might have gone mad. Do you feel that your faith is gone? That was his first sentence. The doctor was in a daze. He couldn't even hold his gun properly. He was supposed to complete the mission. His boss took his gun, his voice calm. If it's gone, find it again. Then the figure dashed into the jungle. When his boss appeared again, the mission was completed. He had paid the price of hypnosis. Even until this day. When she woke up in the middle of the night, he would ask himself, is it worth it? Until the boss came back. Only then did he understand what it meant to find faith again if you don't have it. Many years ago, a man stood in the sun and asked him if he wanted to join the army. That was his childhood friend, the comrade who had sacrificed himself. That day had finally arrived. In his most youthful years he raised his right hand and faced the red flag. The scattered light shone on his face and even his eyes were bright. I will bravely face all hardships and dangers, whether it is training or actual combat. No matter what kind of danger I face, I will remain calm and kill the enemy bravely. No matter what happens, I will remember my oath. I am willing to be a model soldier and will never give in. If necessary, I will sacrifice myself for the country. If necessary, leave the last bullet for me. Chapter 12:20. The night sky disappeared into the thick clouds along with the plane. The sky outside started to brighten up. It was still a little pale and the north wind blew in through the window. The youngster under the blanket moved. She reached her hand out, probably wanting to touch the person beside her. Unexpectedly, she felt a chill in her palm. Bojio opened her eyes slowly. Her black hair was a little messy. When it was curled up, it made her face look even more handsome. He turned his head to look at the time and furrowed his brows. He grabbed the combat uniform and quickly put it on. She hadn't forgotten that there would be a comprehensive evaluation today. This meant that there would be a military demonstration against Do. Was it because of this that the Almighty's name was so high? Bojio thought about it as she brushed her teeth. Just then the whistle sounded outside. She turned and looked at the height of the second floor. She didn't go down. Instead, she grabbed her jacket and put it on. Then she jumped down against the wind. The hem of her jacket could still be vaguely seen. He landed on the ground beautifully and ran a few steps forward. Very quickly he regrouped. Someone started to assign missions. They were divided into a few small teams. They were still fighting in the jungle. But this time it wasn't just the new recruits. There were also veterans from the original team. Bojio's standing posture was very standard. But when she glanced at the captain who gave the orders, she looked over. It didn't matter if their team lacked Prince. Even Wolf wasn't on time? Bojio narrowed her eyes. Then she glanced over. It wasn't just their team. Another team had changed their captain. Magician wasn't here either? Bojio's fingers tightened. She knew their way of doing things. They were never late and were always the ones in charge of every training session. But this time all 3 of them weren't here. Was it a coincidence? How could there be such a coincidence? Unless there was something wrong? Bojio raised a brow. She seemed to have figured something out. The pair of eyes shook violently. Her heart started to beat erratically. No, it couldn't be. She must be thinking too much. They said that today was the final evaluation. The more she told herself that, the clearer her thoughts became. Especially since she still had the star tassel that the Almighty had given her. And his performance last night. He called her name over and over again. Bojio stiffened, biting down on her lips. It wasn't an illusion. It was not a dream either. By then the Almighty would have already left. If that was the case, Bojio turned, heading towards the west. The team leader, who was in the middle of announcing the mission, did not expect someone in the team to act like this. He raised his voice and said, "Number 10, return to the team. Where are you going?" Bojio didn't seem to hear him. She didn't stop. Instead, she sped up, her long legs gradually turning into a sprint. She stopped at the highest command center and looked around, but she didn't see the familiar figure inside. Everything seemed to be confirming her premonition bit by bit. "Which team are you from? You can't come in." A guard stopped him. Chapter 12:21. Captain Qin? The guard was at a loss. It was obvious he had never seen him before. Bojio loosened her grip. Her frail figure stood there. For some reason, the guard felt that he was being a little too presumptuous in stopping her. "Is there something wrong with you? If there's anything, you can make a report." Bojio couldn't hear what the guard said. The more she pieced together the information in her mind, the clearer some things became. The adjutant glanced outside the door before turning. "General, it's recruit number 10. The military demonstration is about to start. What is the kid doing here?" The old general stood up. The moment he took a step forward, he paused and frowned. "Do you think the kid guessed that youngster Qin and the others left early?" The adjutant replied, "I can't be sure. Why don't I go take a look?" "Go take a look." The old general's expression turned serious. "Don't let the kid notice anything." The adjutant nodded. He knew that if number 10 had guessed that the mission had been brought forward, he would have to think of a way to keep him here. If he hadn't guessed it, they would have to wait a little longer. They could take action 2 days later. He shouldn't be able to sense it so quickly. Even though the adjutant thought that way, he wasn't very confident. When he walked out, Bojio walked over with her long legs. The adjutant asked his men to watch the youngster's actions. His heart was in his throat. Then he received news that the youngster had gone to participate in the military demonstration. The adjutant relaxed and went to report to the general. At this moment, Bojio hid behind the trees. Without anyone noticing, she turned her body and took off the communication earpiece that was given to the recruits. That was an indispensable part of any military demonstration. At this moment, Bojio took it off because she sensed that someone was watching her. Hence, she didn't show any difference. Instead, she quickly returned to the team and sneaked into the forest. But the next moment, Bojio glanced up and glanced at Bing. She took off her rifle and placed it at the side. Then she walked in the opposite direction. No one had expected the youngster to leave the team silently and return to the training ground. Even the old general received news that Bojio had entered the jungle. Logically speaking, at this point in time, the young man should not have appeared at the place where he had left in the beginning. But Bojio had indeed returned to the military camp. That wasn't all. Without her rifle, she moved extremely quickly. She was dressed in her military uniform and glided across the training ground. She held onto the railing with one hand and leaped over the training ground, heading straight for the Lamborghini parked under the tree. Bojio's voice was raspy, but she moved quickly. She pulled the car door open and said, "Unlock." After spending a few days together, Xiaohei had already given up hope that its master would drive it away. After the intelligence system was activated, its voice sounded. "Okay, master, you can start your lovey-dovey mode. This time, I will definitely be a qualified listener." As a car that could understand human language, what else could it do? Instead of choosing to be destroyed, it would rather happily accept the fact that its master had been bewitched by the demon. But what Xiaohei didn't expect was, this time, Bojio didn't support her chin with one hand on the steering wheel and smile faintly like the previous 2 times. Instead, she turned her head and pulled on the seatbelt. The face in the rear mirror was handsome and exuding a dark aura. Fuel level detection. In that instant, the atmosphere in the car changed. Even though he didn't know why. But Xiaohei knew that its master was going to drive it away. The system said, 80% fuel, can drive for more than 200 kilometers. Connect to the network communication device, Bojio said as she adjusted the settings. The intelligent navigation system showed a three-dimensional image. Network connection completed. Import the driving memory and find the weakest line of defense. Bojio's eyes lit up. Navigation completed. Go straight in the 9 o'clock direction, Little Hay said. Bojio turned her right hand and swung her tail beautifully. She didn't waste any time as she sped along the route. The top-notch sports car with smooth lines seemed to have returned to its original form. It wasn't just a car that was parked in the military camp for people to view. Bat's speed was one of the fastest in the world. Everyone who loved cars knew that. That was because no one had expected someone to be able to start Chinmo's sports car. It was already too late by the time the garrison troops realized it. Moreover, most of their attention was on the military exercise. Hence, no one knew that Bojio had driven out of the military camp. When the old general heard the news, the phone rang. The person on the other end of the line spoke slowly. The person on the other side of the phone said slowly, "Old Chief, I'm here to apply for my soldier's discharge. To be honest, I didn't expect this person to not be selected into the Special Operations team. Now that she has returned to her original unit, the process has started again." The old general recognized the voice and his eyes widened in shock. "Little Tang, you're trying to snatch someone from me again. Let me tell you, anyone can retire, but this technical soldier can't. Send him back." Tang Imo was stunned. "Old general, she is my soldier, how did it become me snatching her?" The man smiled. "Besides, it isn't that I don't want to send her back, she doesn't want to go back." The old general was anxious. "I promised someone to keep her in the military camp." "Who did you promise?" "Chinemo." "I'm afraid you're going to go back on your words. This soldier is very independent." After the man finished speaking, he added, "The procedure has started. How about this, I'll go to your military camp some other day and we'll talk face to face." The old general wasn't aware of this youngster's style. He was still calling him when the line was already hung up. After the man hung up, he tilted his head and pressed down on his Bluetooth earpiece. "Z, you really know how to cause trouble for me." Bojio turned the steering wheel, avoiding the radar. The small jammer made her signal bad. "Is that so? Young Master Tang seems to be handling it easily. Tell me, where is the Special Operations team now?" "The security level is S. I don't have any news on my side." Young Master Tang chuckled lightly. "But I have other news for you." Bojio arched a brow. "Nothing good usually happens when you smile like that. Z, you sound like an abandoned child." Young Master Tang tapped his fingers on the table. "It seems like you really like Chinemo," Bojio smiled. "That's right, I like him. It's better than someone who likes his childhood sweetheart and hasn't managed to get her yet." Young Master Tang wasn't annoyed, he smiled. "This is fun, you probably don't understand." Bojio drove away from the checkpoint. Young Master Tang spoke again. "Back then, Chinemo was involved in a case. Due to the vile nature of the case, it hasn't been made public. If it was made public, some people would definitely be affected." Bojio's fingers paused. On the other end of the Bluetooth earpiece, she could still hear his voice. It was deep and light. "Hypnosis, it affected a middle school student at the border. What they did exceeded many people's expectations." Bojio realized that the next part was the main point, hence she slowed down. In the beginning, they were just distorting the truth on the internet. Just like what you experienced in Jianghu City, the infringers were extremely arrogant because of this group of people supporting them. They didn't care about right or wrong, as long as they liked it, it should be theirs. After stealing someone else's things, they claimed it was true love. Simply put, they were the mistress and wanted to build a chastity for themselves. At this point, the melodious voice suddenly changed the topic. Later, it was confirmed that these people were all in contact with a foreign psychological criminal, so this operation was destined to be difficult to complete. Because they were the enemy's people, they were also hostages that we needed to rescue at that time. Bojio tightened her grip on the steering wheel. She exerted more and more strength. The Flying Tigers sent many people over, but every time they went, they didn't return. Young Master Tang seemed to be smoking, his voice becoming deeper. It wasn't because of anything else, it was because they couldn't take it and were affected. The cruelest war you can imagine is the explosion of a bomb. In reality, the scariest thing isn't the bullets but the human heart. No one can measure the human heart, especially the human heart of that age. It's simple, they can act one way in front of you in school and another way behind your back. They can't wait to kill you. They will always be extreme when they look at problems, they like to compete with others, follow the money and enjoy the attention. Actually, this has nothing to do with anyone. After all, people are lonely nowadays. However, this loneliness won't change after being raised because they will always feel that they are not in the wrong. Even if they are about to trample on the law of the world, it is still the same. If you talk to them about their conscience, they will say that they don't need it, so... Bojio interrupted him. So, why do you still keep such people around to harm the human world? Because with a single thought you can become a demon and a Buddha. Young Master Tang stood up. Be it me or Chinamo, we both love someone in our hearts. Because we have someone we love, we will imagine. Even if we see the slightest resemblance to that person in these children, we will stop and tell ourselves that we are here to save them. This has nothing to do with good or evil. But once our hands are stained with the blood of the innocent, we can no longer hug someone openly. I don't know what other people's beliefs are, but I can roughly guess Chin Mo's. That year, when he was carrying out his mission, he probably had someone supporting him in his heart. That was why he was able to last till the end. But the more he did so, the more dangerous it was, because once that person was gone, Chin Mo's mental state would crumble. Bojio increased the speed of the car. She suddenly understood something. Hence, she was filled with regret. Why was she so stupid? He had lost all his memories of her, all the bits and pieces of their childhood. It was because she was the knot in his heart. He hadn't slept for so many days. He didn't feel safe and he didn't even like the night. Was it because in his subconscious mind she was gone? Little Bojio, listen carefully. Now that you have spent money to buy me, you can't be half-hearted in the future. You can't be like those brainless girls in television dramas, disappearing whenever you want. If I have done anything wrong, you can tell me. I might not change, but you have to remember, a master can't abandon his pet or it will die. Bojio was still in a daze. The little tiger's ear was still being pulled. Don't spout nonsense. How can it die? You don't believe me? The little boy seemed unhappy. He tightened his grip. How did the cat on the street die? Bojio paused. Didn't it starve to death? Why did it starve to death? Was it abandoned by its master? It was obvious that the Almighty had learned how to guide her thoughts. The moment Bojio thought about her favorite pet turning into such a shriveled state, she reached out and hugged the soft little boy in front of her. I won't let you starve to death. With that, she seemed to be worried about something. What if we get separated? Even if we're separated, I'll be waiting for you at the place you're most interested in. Other than playing games, dismantling keyboards and eating, what else can you do? He glanced at her coldly. Also, tell me, why did we get separated? Bojio's round eyes kept turning. She reached out to caress his face. It was just an example. Don't use such an example in the future. He allowed her to fool around. He was dressed like a little prince and there was a faint smile on his lips. Idiot. She was indeed an idiot. She hadn't done a single thing she had promised him. But he had done everything he had promised. Even if he had lost all his memories of her. She should have found him earlier. Actually, it wasn't that she hadn't looked for him. After being separated for 3 years, she had gone. She hadn't been old, but at that time, she had understood what was black and what was white. She had always said that she had things she wanted to do. Hence, she had chosen herself over what she wanted to do in him. But he had his own righteous path. He had never thought of letting go of her. She thought that she would never turn completely black. Because she had understood a principle. She had never been alone. He could understand those who couldn't be understood by others. He could tolerate those who couldn't be tolerated by others. That person had always been standing at the place they had agreed on. He had never left. She was the one who had lost him. Chapter 12:22. In the afternoon, the sun was blazing. On the desert, the silhouette of a Lamborghini rushed out of the thick fog. There was only one sports car in the vast no-man's land. The amount of fuel in the tank was just enough to reach the nearby town. Bojio turned the steering wheel, her dark eyes drifting with the scenery. There wasn't an ATM in this place. After Bojio reached the place, she wanted to get some petrol. The locals asked her if they could pay online. Bojio didn't have a phone on her, so she used her belongings as collateral. Everyone saw that she was wearing a camouflage uniform and were extremely enthusiastic, especially since the weather was very dry. The old lady watched as the child stood there pouring gasoline. She got the child to fetch some water, asking for Bojio to drink some. Bojio was indeed thirsty, but when she saw the child's dark and small face, she stilled. Because it was a border area, some people here didn't know how to speak Chinese. Most of them spoke the language of the minority. Even snacks were rare. It was probably because it was in a no-man's land, so it was difficult to transport supplies here. Bojio took the bowl, tilted her head back and finished it. Then she opened her pocket, took out a candy and placed it in the child's palm. She took one and held it in her mouth, the corners of her lips lifting. The child's eyes lit up and he spoke in a local language. Bojio didn't understand, but for some reason she thought of the Almighty. If the Almighty was here, he would definitely know what the child meant. Bojio, who was leaning against the main driver's seat, paused for a moment. She checked the fuel again and then another few hundred kilometers of driving. At the next location, she changed out of her camouflage uniform and took a shower to remove the black on her face. She changed into a black mask, dressed as a local and sneaked into the country tea. Both sides of the bustling river were filled with vendors. Here, spices and fruits were equally famous. Of course, there was also the local masa chicken. At the same time, the intersection of the three countries was also known as the ungoverned area. It was located in a mountainous area with a unique landscape, lush forests and beautiful scenery. It sounded very beautiful, but because of the climate and area, it became a natural barrier and plantation base. A pure black business car. It looked ordinary from the outside, but inside there were many videos and local maps. The people in the car had already changed their clothes the moment they got off the plane. Qin Imo wore a suit and a pair of gold-rimmed spectacles, successfully hiding the sharpness in his eyes. However, his noble aura couldn't be changed, so Prince's scalp went numb. The more the great demon king acted like this, the more terrifying he was. However, what he didn't understand was himself. What was going on with this leopard fur coat? And the big gold chain around his neck. Why did he have to wear this outfit that he despised the most? He turned his head to look at Magician. He was wearing a very handsome leather jacket. Wolf was the same. Because of this, Prince risked being glanced at and asked, Boss, what are we going to do? Recently, Kawang's business isn't doing well. Qin Mo's voice was faint. Prince was stupid. So, he needs a nouveau riche to help him consume his goods. Qin Mo tilted his head, the aura of a big boss bursting forth. Prince knew how to take a deeder. Boss wants to use this method to lure him out. Not bad, but a nouveau riche? Wait a minute, he was the one who looked like a nouveau riche the most. Boss, pardon me for asking, but why did you choose me? He couldn't possibly send him to his death. Qin Mo's voice was still the same. General didn't tell you? Uncle was very excited. Prince straightened his back. I'm excited to carry out a mission for the country. Qin Mo praised slowly. Not bad. Prince guessed, could it be that boss is also interested in my passion? The entire army. Qin Mo tapped his fingers on the table, looking like a successful financial analyst. Those who look old-fashioned aren't rich enough. Those who are rich aren't old-fashioned enough. Those with an aura aren't easy to deceive. Until you appeared, you fit the description. The landlord's foolish son, a nouveau riche. Prince? Boss, this isn't a compliment. At this moment, Qin Mo was still holding a pair of binoculars looking at someone. Suddenly he arched a brow and called out, Hunter. There was a swoosh. The car door opened. Hunter was like a bolt of lightning, rushing to a shop and grabbing a man who was counting money with his head lowered. He put a black plastic bag over him and dragged him into the car. The man was still shouting, but he couldn't make a sound. The moment he got into the car door closed. Then there was the sound of the car starting. The man couldn't see anything and spoke in Burmese. He wanted to remove the thing on his head, but he realized that he couldn't move at all. Oh, don't you know who I am? How dare you kidnap me? Before he could finish his sentence, Qin Mo's long fingers pressed on the off button. Qin Mo's long fingers pressed on the close button, leaning back. Don't you know how to speak Chinese? Suddenly he heard that voice. The man didn't have much of a reaction since he hadn't thought about it that way. He scoffed and changed his tone. Who said I don't know how to speak? Who exactly are you? Why are you acting all mysterious? Who am I? Can't you tell? Qin Mo stretched out his hand slowly. It was a gun that was pressed against his forehead. The man woke up abruptly, licking his lips nervously. Impossible? How is that possible? Why don't you tell me why it's impossible? The voice became even clearer. The man fell back in fright. Young master. MMH. Qin Mo didn't deny it. The man's mind went blank. Strictly speaking, he was in the underworld, but on the other hand, he had once been Qin Mo's informant. He knew that as long as he was around, some big bosses wouldn't be able to achieve their goals. Moreover, he would give him a good price. But at the same time his methods were also quite ruthless. The man wanted to run. Chinamo allowed him to do as he pleased, his voice faint. "I'll give you a chance to live." The man knelt down, not even removing the black plastic bag from his face. "Young master, I really didn't know that giving you the wrong information would bring about such a bad outcome. I might not be a good person, but I have never thought of betraying my country, and I don't dare to think about it. Young master, you can take a look at my nationality. I haven't changed. You can take a look." Chinamo swept him a glance. "Since that's the case, you must have news about Kawang." The man paused, his eyes starting to turn. Chinamo didn't give him any chance to think. "I've said it before, I'm giving you a chance to live." The man trembled, the fear in his heart causing him to shrink back. I'll tell you everything, but I don't know much about young master. He is a strange person, he never shows his face, and everyone says that as long as they talk to him, they will be manipulated by him. Hence, hooligans like us definitely wouldn't be able to come into contact with such a person. But during this period of time he has bought quite a number of guns. You can go over and take a look." Chinamo tilted his head and cuffed the man. Young master." The man's face changed in fear. Chinmo's voice was faint. "What are you afraid of?" The man wasn't the only one who was afraid. Even Prince was afraid when he saw his boss in this state. There was a gun pointed at his head at all times. "I still need you to do something." Chinamo glanced up. "Go to various places and spread the news that you know a big boss who is interested in doing business that can earn money quickly." The man glanced over. "Big boss." Chinamo reached out and removed the black plastic bag from his head. Then he tugged the man and made him look to the left. "He's the one." Prince, who was being visited. The man and Prince faced each other. After 2 seconds he asked, "Pardon me for asking, but is this a soldier?" Prince smirked. "Nonsense. Doesn't look like it." The man ignored the word nonsense and turned to Chinamo. "A young master, I have to say that you have a good eye when it comes to choosing people. I'm impressed." "Prince, if you want to suck up to me, just suck up to me. Why did you have to pick such a point?" The man looked at Chinamo and asked, "Young master, why don't you do it yourself?" Prince wanted to ask this question too. Fine, he admitted that he did look like a nouveau riche, but in terms of the word gangster, boss was obviously more suitable. He just stood there and changed his clothes, looking lazy and annoying. Especially when he released his aura, he didn't look like a major general at all. He wanted to be in the underworld. "Kawang knows me." 5 words, not too fast or too slow. However, it caused everyone present to be stunned. Prince wanted to ask, "Boss, how did you know a drug lord?" "I listened to his class when he was a professor. It would be helpful to explain things clearly." Hunter, Wolf, and even Magician pricked up their ears. The man widened his eyes. "Then, young master, do you?" His class was all about explaining his point of view. Even though it sounds beautiful, it's actually a high-level multi-level marketing organization that scams fools. Chinamo removed his spectacles and placed them on the table. "That's why I didn't continue listening." Everyone. A high-level multi-level marketing organization that scams fools. In terms of eloquence, boss was indeed unbeatable. "But did Kawang know that you were talking about him in this way?" The man coughed. "But he is really scary. I heard that after interacting with him for a long time, people will listen to him subconsciously. Psychological guidance, it's very normal." Chinamo opened the car door and tilted his head. The man hesitated. "Young master, shouldn't I get them to stop the car first before I get down? Didn't you jump out of the car rather straightforwardly?" Chinamo raised his wrist. "I'm in a hurry, do you want to jump yourself or?" I'll jump myself." The man used all his strength and landed on his back. He rolled 3 rounds, his waist aching terribly. He reached into his pocket. There was a stack of money and a bullet inside. The moment he touched the bullet, his entire body stiffened. He didn't dare to have any other thoughts and started to hop on one leg. Hunter looked at the figure in the rearview mirror. This time he was completely obedient. As Prince, he had never imagined that there would be a day when he would start a big business. And this big business had the devil as his investment consultant. After receiving the information from the informant, they arrived at an ancient building. The fragrance of the building lingered in the air. The person sitting at the head of the table took a sip of tea and raised his hand, signaling for the woman who was dancing to leave. Then he asked, "Do you want to do business with me?" Chinamo replied. He stuffed one hand into his trouser pocket, his gold-rimmed glasses reflecting the light. Sometimes Prince admired this trait of his boss. It was rare to see someone who could talk business without batting an eyelid with a knife on his neck. I heard that the goods here are good. My boss is very interested. Of course he doesn't do this business. Just treat it as making a friend. When Chinamo said this, he took a sip of tea. Prince sat at the side and thought to himself. Similarly, a knife was placed on his neck. His aura couldn't be weak. But how exactly did his boss ignore the other party's ferocious gaze? Old O was one of the top firearms suppliers in the Golden Triangle. He had a complicated bloodline and never showed mercy. But no matter what, he was always concerned about benefits. When the other party pushed a small box of money over, he was already tempted. However, he was wary of the three people's identities. After all, it was too strict now. He was slightly worried that they were spies sent by someone. He turned his head and said to the person beside him, "Go and investigate." Yes. The person retreated. Oldo then continued, "I just like to make friends. How do you read that poem?" The moment he finished speaking, Prince felt the pressure on his neck disappear. Then he heard the voice of his current consultant. "A bosom friend in the sea is like a neighbor in the distance." Not bad. Old O seemed to be relieved that the other party didn't hide his identity. "How many years has it been since I heard a Chinese poem? How nostalgic." Prince turned his head and looked at him. "Consultant." Chinamo drank his tea and said faintly, "Boss O is a scholar. You can tell a thing or two from this pavilion." Prince. How can you follow up with such a sentence? Boss, you can tell someone's hobbies from their decorations. How did you learn this? Ah. Old O seemed very happy. Brother, you must stay for a meal. We can also talk about poems. Prince? *CK, this line is unbearable. Old man, to be honest, do you know who said this to whom? You can say it to my boss. However, boss mustn't accept this meal. It was a Hongmen banquet. Even if they called each other brothers as if they had transmigrated, he still mustn't accept it. Not today, Chinamo said. Old O narrowed his eyes. Chinamo casually placed the teacup down. Tomorrow boss and I will bring the money to collect the goods. We can chat with Mr. O, Prince. Tomorrow will be even more dangerous. Boss, do you really not want to go back? People who didn't understand psychology wouldn't understand what Chinamo was trying to do. As they spoke, Old O's murderous aura dissipated. In addition, the person from the other side walked back. He leaned over and said in Old O's ear, "I've checked. He is from China. His family is in the mining business and is involved in the real estate and entertainment industry. The police don't have such a person." Are you sure? Old O lowered his voice. The person lowered his gaze. I'm sure. No one knew. Old O and the others only found the information that Chinamo wanted him to see. Hacking into the network system. And when the other party asked for information, at the appropriate time the previewer link was inserted. This way, as long as the other party used the internet to search, they would definitely see this information. In addition, if they hadn't made preparations in advance, this wouldn't have happened. No matter how the other party inquired, their identity would be real and all real information related to them would be erased. This was arranged every time they carried out an overseas mission. In addition, no matter how powerful the other party was, they could only find the police and ordinary troops. They wouldn't be able to find them. Prince only saw someone holding a knife to his neck. He didn't realize that long before they came in, Wolf had already disappeared. The best sniping vantage point, the direction in which the long gun was pointed, was Old O. This was Chinmo's plan. As the prey, Old O didn't realize that he had fallen into the other party's trap. It was also because he believed in the information that when he looked at Chinamo again, it was as if he was looking at a big client. Brother, tell me the truth. You are the one in charge here, right? Chinamo smiled. Sir, you have sharp eyes. This time, as the consultant, I am indeed the one in charge. My main task is to guide little boss. It is rare to see a talent like brother, Old O continued. Prince felt that between the two of them, Old O and his boss were like old friends at first sight. His boss treating Old O was completely a trap. However, when would this old-fashioned way of chatting end? He really couldn't take it anymore. He had to admit that his boss was also a talent in this aspect. No matter what the other party said, he could maintain his composure. He was a top-notch talent. As they chatted, Old O couldn't stop talking. If his subordinate had someone like brother, it would be a blessing in his life. Prince. *CK. Did he think he was dead? How could he be so brazen in trying to poach him? At this moment his boss gave him a look. Prince knew it was time for him to appear. He directly brought out the side of him from before he joined the army. Not only was he sloppy, but he also loved to throw money. Although he didn't want to admit that he had done such a stupid thing in the past. But now he indeed didn't feel out of place. He took the money and slapped it. He raised his eyebrows. After saying so much, where are the goods? If you don't want to show it, don't hide it. There is money here. Oldo raised his eyebrows. Chinamo said calmly, what did boss say before we came out? Prince subconsciously shrank back when he heard his boss's voice. I'll listen to you. Hee, there has to be an end to any business. That impatience successfully created his image as a nouveau riche second generation. Oldo laughed. Since you are so straightforward, brother, bring the money tomorrow to collect the goods. But there is one thing you can't do in certain places. Chinamo put down the teacup again, his eyes moving. Prince paused for a moment before he understood. It was time for him to say his lines again. He crossed his legs and said, we're just here to buy some guns for fun. As for business, we're only interested in things that earn us money quickly. We're here to get the goods. Guns are just for our daily needs. Oh. It was obvious that in that instant Oldo thought he had found out about some secret. After all, Chinamo, who was sitting at the side, frowned. Then he took the suit jacket that was draped over the wooden chair. His mood was still calm. Children don't know the rules. I hope sir won't take it to heart. Not at all. Who hasn't been young before? Old O smiled very amiably. He twirled the Buddha beads in his hands. Just by looking at him, no one would think that he dealt with guns. They would think that he was an old man who believed in Buddha. However, in such a place, everyone worshipped Buddha. We will visit again tomorrow. This was Chinmo's last sentence. This time, when they left, Old O didn't feel anything was amiss. Instead, after they left, he turned his head and looked at the shadow. You heard everything? Of course. Hearing the sound, a person walked out. This person didn't look like someone to be trifled with. There was even a tattoo on his face. He was in charge of all the contact with the outside world. He called himself Scorpion and was currently Kawang's most trusted person. Oldo took a sip of tea. It seems like the other party wants to do business with you. What do you think? We aren't sure of his identity yet. It's hard to say. Scorpion sat down, his fingers sliding across the blade. Oldo arched a brow. You aren't sure of his identity? You heard it just now. My men have checked. He isn't from the police side. I will tell Wang about this. Scorpion stabbed the dagger on the wooden table. Let him analyze. If there is a problem with the other party and he is from China, we can use him as a sacrifice. When he heard the word China, Old O frowned. We are doing our own business. Why do we have to go against China? This isn't a wise move. Since we are talking about this topic, Wang asked me to ask you. Scorpion lowered his body. Why don't you expand your business to China? Wang also said that as a business partner, he will help you find a market. Since you're so stubborn, don't blame us for not protecting you if something happens. When he heard this sentence, the thugs beside him had already stood up with a swoosh. Scorpion laughed out loud. Think about it carefully. Who is the boss in the golden triangle now? Since the old man sitting in the middle didn't give any orders, the thugs didn't move. But Oldo's voice rang out. There's no need to think about it. I won't do things that will bring about my own destruction. Moreover, you seem to have forgotten that I have Chinese blood in me. Scorpion narrowed his eyes and leaned back. I'm just joking. It's up to you if you don't want to expand your business. Let's see if that group of people is really stupid with money or if everything is just an act. At this moment, outside the small courtyard, 800 meters away, with a swoosh, Chinamo closed the car door and loosened his tie. His voice was calm. Wolf, come down. Be careful when you leave. Yes. There was a communication device in the car. Prince was still immersed in his acting and couldn't pull himself out. In the end, he was stopped by Chinmo's cold glare. Boss, do you think this old O will sell the guns to China? Prince's worry wasn't without reason. Chinmo threw his tie away. He dares. He released his aura completely, shocking everyone. Chapter 12:23. Swoosh. There was another sound of a car door opening. It was Wolf. After everyone was picked up, Hunter could finally relax. Magician asked, Boss, what are we going to do next? Show our faces at the market? There's no need. Chinmo glanced up, his voice calm. When I was talking to old Q just now, I had an unexpected gain. Unexpected gain? Prince was confused. What gain? Why didn't he know? Chinmo glanced at Fatty's laptop, multitasking. The customers in the pavilion weren't just the two of us, there was another person. There was another person? Why didn't he see him? Qin Imo tapped on one of the messages. He would appear there at this time, but he didn't even come out. It must be him. Scorpion, all of Kwang's activities in the outside world are carried out by him, selling goods and purchasing guns. We were sitting in the pavilion for a long time, but he didn't appear. He should be observing us, Fatty. Yes. What's the situation on your side? Fatty removed his earpiece, a mischievous smile on his face. As expected, boss, the other party investigated you and Prince. All the traffic on my website came from him. What do you mean? Prince widened his eyes. They investigated me and boss? But on second thought, it was true that they would investigate. Prince hadn't expected their disguise to be so meticulous, but the other party hadn't let down their guard. Was this the difference between a country and a foreign country? If it hadn't been for his boss, one sentence would have been enough to make the other party raise their guns and keep them there. It seemed like he had to be more careful in his next actions. Fatty tapped on the keyboard and turned to Prince. It's easy to deal with this place, but Kwang's side isn't easy. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to see anything wrong with my website, but Kwang has a hacker under him. He might be able to see through it. Hence, we have to contact Scorpion as soon as possible and use him to break through the organization. Wait for him to contact us. In the end, Qin Imo was the one who decided the direction. Next, you just have to act your part as a rich second generation. Qin Imo closed his eyes after he finished speaking. Only then did they remember that ever since the troops had left, their boss hadn't rested for even a minute. To be able to deal with such a situation without any rest, he had dispelled their suspicions. He had to admit that the boss was really strong. On this day, everyone was talking about how rich the Crown Prince and his gang were. Many people want to do business with them. However, he was blocked by the other party's investment advisor. He said that they wanted to take a look and compare the goods. This was the bad thing about Chinese people. They were very cunning when doing business. At first, they thought that he was a rich fool. They didn't expect him to be so hard to deal with. However, it was precisely because of this that he was even more certain of the other party's wealth, and he was even more eager to cooperate with him. Other than Kwang, there were other poppy businesses here. The news was that both parties were in the midst of a discussion. After hearing the news, Scorpion couldn't sit still. He told Kwang everything that had happened here one after another. Let's wait a little longer. This was Kwang's original words. He was wearing a white coat, standing in the middle of the crowd. Investigate the background of this group of people, we can only be at ease when doing business. Scorpion replied, I've already sent someone to investigate, their background isn't bad, they are the most suitable to be our seller. I even got someone to check their assets, they are very rich. I'm referring to other aspects, Kwang said as he turned. Their identities. Scorpion paused. I'll take a closer look. I'll leave them to you, don't cause any trouble, Kwang said, his gaze landing outside the window. Scorpion instantly understood. Wang, you went to school? Kwang didn't reply because someone had come over. Doctor, he sprained his ankle while running, can you check if it's serious? Kwang chuckled, hanging up the phone. He bent down, pressing his fingers on the person's leg like a professional school doctor, a warm smile on his face. Fortunately, the bone isn't injured. I'll spray some medicine on him later, remember to apply a hot compress and don't exercise for the time being. All right, the male student replied. F***seek, I told you it was fine, why did you have to scare yourself? Kwang listened, tilting his head, holding a fountain pen as he wrote down the list. Everything in the school seemed beautiful, even the wind was warmer than outside. Very quickly, the gentle atmosphere was interrupted by the sound of a car braking. It was a pure black Lamborghini stopping at the school gates. With a turn of the steering wheel, it disappeared from the guard's line of sight. The guard, who had just stood up, frowned. What was the meaning of this? He had assumed the other party was coming in. In reality, the car hadn't gone far. Bojio sat in the driver's seat, her Bluetooth headset blinking. This is the school? MMH. Hoshino's voice came through. Your location isn't wrong, I've already settled the admission procedures for you. This school isn't bad locally, it's normal for students to transfer in or temporarily stay here for a month before transferring out. It won't raise any suspicions, but I've done my research, this school is very normal. Other than a few comments on the internet, there aren't any obvious cases of bullying and there aren't any news of students wanting to commit suicide. All the information of the teachers is with me, it's a very normal recruitment process. Why did you set your eyes on this school? Bojio stopped the car, pressing her neck and turning it twice. It was a suave action. When she glanced up, her eyes were filled with darkness. I want to uncover part of the criminal records from back then. Some of the students were rescued and spent 2 years in the psychological rehabilitation center. During those 2 years they were resting. How big of a coincidence do you think it would be for 4 of them to choose this school to continue their studies? It's such an ordinary school, the enrollment rate isn't high and the environment isn't ordinary either. It's hard to believe that it's so attractive. Hoshino typed a word before pausing, shifting the person who had interrupted his call. His faint smile paired with his pure-colored sweater made him seem as though he was living in a manga. From what you said, the other party seems a little difficult to deal with. Do you want me to fly over? It's fine. Bojo smiled. Just support me from the back. Hoshino glanced outside the floor-to-ceiling window. I'll wait for you here, there's still a week left. What? Bojo's thoughts were completely focused on the school. Hoshino carried the cat and placed it on his shoulder. He had always been gentle when facing Bojo. There's still a week before the Asian Cup. Z, the people from Supreme Alliance are all waiting for you. Hey, Vice Captain over there, are you strengthening our enemy camp? Yusishin couldn't stand the fact that someone was ignoring him. He raised his voice with a lazy and mocking tone. Bojo heard him and arched a brow. Why is it him again? Hoshino smiled but didn't say anything. Bojo pouted. Why didn't you throw this young master out? I can't throw him. Hoshino walked to the side of the table, probably to get the cat to leave. Unfortunately, there were times when a certain cat wasn't cooperative. It was obvious that it followed its owner very well. Yusishin was very smart. He held onto the table and laughed. Are you bad-mouthing me? Bojo heard this sentence. She was frank, a devilish smile on her face. It seems like a certain gang is about to close down. If not, how could they tolerate the head of a family freeloading outside? Z, I didn't like you in the past, but now. Yusishin paused. The sharpness in his eyes explained everything. Hoshino roughly understood that some people were born with incompatible auras, for example, these two. But very quickly the other party hung up. When he turned back, the ruthless 10th sect, which was feared by the underworld, had a cold expression on his face. It was obvious that he had lost the argument. With a wave of his hand, his phone was destroyed. Hoshino sat there with a cup of coffee in his hand. He didn't care about the other party's actions. After all, he had already sent the message. If it was possible, he wanted to fly over. After all, there were too many uncertainties in the operation in the school. If he couldn't find anything, he would be even more worried. Of course, Bojo wouldn't come to this school without any preparations. No one could find the operation team. Young Master Tang could only provide her with such information. After discovering this phenomenon, the military had sent people to investigate in secret. Based on the information Bojo received, there were 3 teachers who came from the military. But strangely, no matter who came, they couldn't find anything strange. Ever since she found out about the mission Chinamo had taken in the past, Bojo swore that she wouldn't let him fall into such a situation again. Since she was going to save him, she had to make things simpler. Little Blackie, find a place and wait for me. Don't forget to lock the door automatically. Bojo reached out, lifted the black bag and slammed it onto her shoulder. She pushed the car door open and walked towards the middle school that wasn't far away. This time she didn't have silver hair. Instead, she had dyed her hair black. She looked like a clean little brother that people often saw in school. The school uniform here was different from the one in Jianghu City. It was a very Chinese sportswear. But even so, the clothes didn't fall down on Bojo. Instead, it made her look more refreshed. Bojo's blue jacket was half open and she wore a white t-shirt inside. Bojo appeared in front of the security guard. The security guard didn't stop her. He assumed it was a student who was late after the lunch break. But when did such a handsome boy appear in their school? The security guard was still questioning her when Bojo walked towards the teacher's office. She had always trusted Hoshino's efficiency. It was a perfect identity. When the teacher from the teacher's office saw Bojo, she glanced at the information on the computer. Then she lifted her head to look at the student. With this face, it was no wonder he had delayed his studies because of a girl. Even if you only stay here for a month, I hope you can integrate into our class. This year is very important to you. Also, our school forbids students from dating at such a young age. I want to make this clear to you first. I hope you won't make this mistake. Bojo smiled. I'll listen to you. The teacher nodded. She closed the information in her hands. I'll bring you to the classroom. The students in the class were very curious about the new student. After all, it meant that they had a new toy. However, when some of them saw the young man standing on the stage, they put away their thoughts and exchanged glances with each other. She reached under the table and pressed her phone. Did you see him? He's so handsome. He has canine teeth when he smiles. It seems like he has a good family background. We got lucky. Should we cancel the prank game? We must cancel it. Pull him in and let him play with us. That's a good idea. The few girls smiled at each other. When they lifted their heads, the youngster had finished introducing herself. The young man had already finished his self-introduction with a smile on his face. There are 2 empty seats. Which one do you want to sit on? The teacher asked. Bojo glanced up. Her gaze landed at the back. It was a place that every classroom had, the place where the broom and dustpan were. Similarly, many people weren't willing to sit there. Under normal circumstances, it would be empty. But in this classroom it wasn't. Bojo retracted her gaze. She grabbed her bag and walked over. There was a person sitting there. His shoulders were hunched and his figure was slightly out of shape. But that wasn't the reason why Bojo stopped. It was because of the injury on her face. Even though it was covered by her hair, the injury was still visible. It wasn't obvious and others might not have noticed it. But Bojo was too familiar with it. She placed her bag down with a thud. Even the teacher from the teaching department frowned, but she didn't say anything. On the other hand, the girls narrowed their eyes. Why is he sitting there? He doesn't know the rules here. He will understand in a few days. That poor B*** is really lucky. I'll wait and see. It was a chat group. Many people in the class were in it. Whoever wasn't in it meant one thing. That person had been kicked out by them. In essence, being kicked out meant abandonment. Those who didn't know anything and liked to lie were poor. They weren't fit to be with them. This was probably the easiest psychological cue to trigger at this age. Most of the time, the formation of such psychological cues was due to the environment. It was a simple matter. If the environment was different, the growth of the child wouldn't be different. In a class, if there were more than 10 students who liked to compare and use money to settle things, the atmosphere would change. Especially for girls. Gradually, the atmosphere would change. The change would be silent. Unknowingly, everyone's topic would change too. Your shoes are so beautiful. Which brand is it? I want to buy a pair too. Or, my dad gave me 1,000 today. I'll send red packets in the group or treat everyone to a meal. The phone is so hard to use. I'll change to the iPhone 7. Perhaps a long time ago, everyone was not like this. As for when exactly it started to change, even they themselves did not know. There was nothing wrong with spending money. There's nothing wrong with having too much money to burn. The problem was that the money parents earned in 3 days might only be enough for their children to treat their classmates to a birthday party. Every parent didn't want their children to look more pitiful than others in school. Hence, they would try their best to give them the best. But most of the time, the monster in the heart was nurtured. We gave them material things, but we didn't teach them how to control it. In school, the methods used to ostracize someone were even more unbearable than in society. The entire class was discussing a topic. No matter what you said, they wouldn't allow anyone to interrupt. Regardless of whether they were pretty or not, the girls who liked to huddle would sit together during breaks or go to the washroom together. Bojo chose to sit at the back not only because she saw some problems but also because she could see the entire situation in the classroom. In just a minute's time, she could already tell who was in control of the class. That's right, it was control. Anyone who was observant would be able to see that the entire class revolved around the 5 girls. They loved to set the pace. The more they did so, the more attention would be focused on them. It was obvious that they enjoyed the attention. At the same time, Bojo could tell that there was something hidden in their eyes when they glanced over. Perhaps this was the difference between pretending to be a teacher and a student. When you are a teacher, you will never know what kind of undercurrents are surging in the classroom. Perhaps the plump girl had already felt it, which was why her expression changed. Bojo twirled the pen, her voice low. Someone bullied you? The girl turned her head and looked over, her eyes red. She hesitated for a moment but didn't say anything. Instead, she pulled the wooden chair out. Even her back was slightly hunched as she walked out. As soon as she went out, the other girls followed her out. Bojo placed the carbon pen down. Before she could put on her jacket, she had already disappeared from her seat. Bang! One of the girls reached out and pulled her into the washroom. She looked down. What's wrong with you? Did you get to know a new classmate? The man shivered as if he was very afraid and shook his head. Softer, you'll attract the teacher's attention. Another girl lowered her voice. But the transfer student today is really handsome. Why would he come to our school? What's so strange about that? Most importantly, this person should stay away from the handsome guy, understand? Unexpectedly at this moment, the girl who was pushed spoke. There's something wrong with him. Who's wrong? Are you suffering from persecutory delusions again? The girl pressed her face down. It's true. Believe me, there's something wrong with that transfer student. He even asked me if someone bullied me. Someone like him won't be able to blend into our class. The girl wanted to get out of her current situation. If someone else had appeared, she wouldn't have to suffer such treatment. From the looks of it, the transfer student was her best chance. The girls glanced at each other. Is he another infiltrator? That's not possible. Wang told us to be careful of the teachers, but the students? Do you think someone would disguise as a student? Besides, he looks to be the same age as us. But how are we going to explain what he heard? He's like this every day. He just wants people to know that he's being bullied. It's normal for a transfer student to ask about it. One of the girls laughed. You guys don't understand her tricks, but I do. I was fooled by her previously. She said that her family is rich and so on and so forth. She even called others to ostracize me. Luckily, she was exposed in the end. Her family is just an ordinary worker and she still dares to pretend in front of me. How can she be more noble than me? Tell me. Peng, another sound rang out. Don't think about finding someone to replace you. That's right. In the past, I thought she was rich and used that to order us to do this and that. Now you have nothing to say. I'm warning you, don't think too much. If you don't know your place, I'll push you into the toilet. As the fat girl quieted down, the conversation gradually disappeared. Less than a minute had passed. The girls walked out, chatting and laughing. They didn't expect to see the transfer student after coming out. He was still as handsome as ever. When he raised his eyebrows, there was even a hint of evil in it. They blushed. Bojo stuffed a hand into her pocket and glanced over. She wasn't looking at the girls but the person at the back. So that was it. The people in this school. None of them were as innocent as the outside world. Hence, no matter who came, they wouldn't be able to find anything. It wasn't that there weren't people who had been bullied. Instead, the people who had been bullied had bullied others before. The more they were in this state, the darker their hearts were. They had already become one with these people long ago. There was no saving them. Bojo retracted her gaze. Her thin lips curved upwards, carrying a hint of indifference. This was probably the biggest difference between her and the Almighty. The environment was definitely a factor that affected people. But Bojo always believed in one thing. The good and evil in human nature were determined from the start. In her heart, some people weren't worth saving. Just now, she had been too anxious and wanted to find a breakthrough point. Next, she couldn't reveal anything else. That Wang was the person she was looking for. She looked around. These people weren't the Kawang who could give people hypnosis. Although Hoshino hadn't found any information. But Bojo was an internet user. Basically, everyone knew that the more attention a person wanted on the internet, the more ordinary they were in reality. Moreover, the Wang they were talking about wouldn't be Kawang. The so-called Wang was just chosen by Kawang. Chapter 12:24. Bojo took a step forward naturally. She stuffed her hands into her pockets. Excuse me. Her words were directed at the few girls. The colder she was, the more attractive she was. Moreover, Bojo didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Her back view was slightly arrogant. He's really handsome. Someone couldn't help but speak up. She turned towards the fat girl. What did you say just now? Is there something wrong with him caring about you? He didn't even look at you, all right? Don't bother about him. Go and ask if anyone knows where he transferred from and if he has a girlfriend. At this age, it seemed like everything else would be thrown to the back of her mind. She would only have fantasies about handsome young men. Everyone had a young heart, even these girls. Very quickly, Bojo became the target of many people's curiosity. She was so popular that when she didn't have a textbook, the people in front of her would turn to ask her if she could borrow a textbook. As for her desk mate, the fat girl from before, her textbook seemed to have been hidden by someone. During the lesson, she was called out by the teacher. Sun Jianing, where's your textbook? The fat girl lowered her head. Her voice was soft. I forgot that I have a lesson today. The teacher frowned. This wasn't the first time that the other party didn't have a textbook in class. The teacher was very responsible. He walked towards her. Sun Jianing, tell the truth. Did someone purposely take your textbook away? The teachers weren't stupid. They were aware of certain things. Bojo sat at the side. She supported her chin. The moment the teacher spoke, the atmosphere in the classroom seemed to freeze, and all sounds stopped abruptly. One had to know that some teachers wouldn't bring these issues up to the table to talk about. But this time the teacher made it clear. The few girls in front turned. Their gazes landed on Sun Jianing. The darkness in their eyes made her lower her head. She continued, "No, teacher, I really forgot that I have a lesson today." After the teacher heard this answer, he didn't know what to say. He sighed and asked the student in front of him to give him a book. There were some things that he couldn't do in every aspect. It was one thing for a student to have a problem, but he couldn't possibly find the problem himself. Moreover, the people in the office also told him not to get involved in this kind of thing. They couldn't do anything about it. This was proven by Sun Jianing. This girl had a bad temper in front of her parents. Once she came to school, her whole person changed. She never said anything about what happened. If she didn't point out someone, the teacher wouldn't be able to intervene in the students' private affairs. The simplest reason was that they couldn't control who was playing with whom. Seeing Sun Jianing sit down obediently, the girls over there laughed, and the classroom returned to its original state. The original textbook was hung outside the window. Almost all the students in the class knew about it, but they acted as if they didn't see it. In this classroom there seemed to be a tacit understanding. As long as it was related to Sun Jianing, they would not care. Some people did it because they didn't want to interfere, while others knew very well that once they interfered, they would also end up in the same situation. Perhaps they would be the ones being ostracized. There was nothing wrong with people choosing to protect themselves. However, the self-protection in this classroom seemed to have changed. Because they were happy to have such a punching bag. Sometimes a person's words could lie, but those micro-expressions would never lie. They were happy with the current situation. Some of them even gloated when Lu Jianing stood up. Hence, the problem wasn't with the girls. Instead, the entire classroom had become like this. That was the biggest abnormality. The atmosphere was something that was created by people. Bo Jiu felt that there was an invisible pair of hands moving these people. It didn't need to use much strength, it just needed to amplify a little. Who could it be? Bo Jiu seemed nonchalant, but her eyes were constantly sizing up every student in the classroom. Those few girls were the first to be excluded. As for the others, Bo Jiu's gaze swept past them. Suddenly, her gaze stopped on another empty seat. There was still someone who wasn't here. Bo Jiu's fingers tapped on the table subconsciously. This was usually an action she would do when she was thinking. She had a feeling. The few people who had been hypnotized had all transferred here. However, every single one of them was like an ordinary student. They hadn't been in the limelight and hadn't been ostracized. Yet they just sat there. When he heard about this, the corners of his mouth were clearly rising. They were enjoying it. If King wasn't alone. Instead he was a small group. Bo Jiu's fingers suddenly paused. Once again she turned to look at those few people. Even if the military came to investigate due to their age, there wasn't any obvious violation of the rules. In fact, it could even be considered as a dutiful job. In that case, the information they found would always be superficial. It was simple, one person wouldn't be able to achieve anything. Anything that could achieve anything would always be handled by 4 to 5 people. There must be something she hadn't come into contact with. What exactly was it? Why? Bo Jiu was still deep in thought when a voice asked, "Why?" It was Sun Jianing. Her eyes were dark as she glanced at Bo Jiu. "Didn't you ask if I was bullied? Why are you acting as though you didn't see anything today? Is it fun to pretend to be concerned?" If one listened carefully, there was hatred in her tone. Perhaps, there was a type of person who didn't feel anything when she was bullied. But if you tried to help her, she would think that you were pretending. There were even times when she forgot how she behaved. Selfish and greedy. Bo Jiu leaned back, her voice calm. "It's fun." What? Sun Jianing's eyes lit up. The people sitting in front heard their conversation. The few girls glanced at each other, completely at ease. How could such a person be a police spy? According to King, someone had written a letter saying that there was a bullying incident in their school. Hence, the police would be conducting a secret investigation. They were told not to be too obvious and that there would be a good thing in the next few days. As long as they performed well, they would be qualified to participate. Chapter 12:25. The more she wanted to accomplish something, the more time she felt was tight. But Bo Jiu's face didn't seem like she was in a hurry, especially when she held her bag with one hand and stood up from her seat. Her nose was tilted to the side, and her tall and straight nose was slightly cold, drawing attention to her appearance. "Hi." Someone walked over. Bojo recognized her. It was the leader of the group. "Do you want to join our group?" "Group?" Bojo paused, her bag still on her shoulder. She arched a brow slowly. "What group?" "A group in class where we discuss things and play games without the teacher." Bojo's eyes darkened, turning a beautiful black. "It sounds interesting. It has to be. How about it? Do you want to join?" The girl tilted her head. Bojo took her phone out naturally. The girl glanced at it. "Wow, the latest model? I've always wanted to buy it, but there isn't any here. Where did you get it from?" "Overseas." Bojo had memorized all the information at the last minute. Since she was going to disguise herself, she had to clean up her background. When the girl heard the word, overseas, she turned and exchanged glances with her friends. She was even more certain that they had made the right choice. You can scan here." The girl opened the QR code. Bojo's attitude seemed casual, but that was the reason it seemed real. After the message was sent, a group of people lined up to welcome her. The atmosphere wasn't a problem. But very quickly Bojo realized the crux of the matter. There were 48 people in the class including her. Almost everyone in the class was in the group, except for 2 people who weren't here. One was Lu Jianing. The other should be the one who wasn't here. That was one of the points. The other point made Bojo's fingers pause for a moment. Then she said calmly, "I thought you would be the admin of the group." "Me?" The girl laughed. "The class monitor should be the one to create the group." "Class monitor?" He was one of the 5 people in the group. Bojo didn't look at anyone else. The longer she stayed here, the more she felt that this classroom was different from other classrooms. The real ostracization wouldn't be shown. It was the subtlety that made one's heart sink. She was no longer facing a group of ordinary middle school students. In fact, these people were already secretly observing her just now. There was one thing that was true. The more they showed off their abilities, the less they would hurt you. The most dangerous ones were those who looked the most ordinary and even pitiful but could still bite you in the back. Lu Jianing was an example. It was the same for the class monitor. It was very simple. Apart from these few girls, the rest of the people who often talked in the group were those few. The difference was that these girls were just lively, but the real topic of conversation was someone else. This was probably the skill of speaking. Being lively wasn't scary. What was important was bringing up the topic. However, there was one thing that bothered Bojo. Why was there someone missing class? "What do you think? The class group is very interesting, isn't it?" The girl asked with a smile. Bojo kept her phone and replied simply, "Not bad." Since there was such a group in every class, it was impossible for the people from the army to not know about it. Why wasn't there any feedback from the information? This could only mean one thing: the group was just a gathering of people to collectively ostracize others. The real order, or rather, the person who constantly formed the psychological suggestion, wouldn't be here. There was another point that was within Bojo's consideration. She wasn't the only one who would place her gaze on these few girls and the 5 transfer students. The people from the army would probably have the same reaction. Under such a strict investigation, how did they manage to contact Kawang? Unless... Bojo clenched her fists as though she suddenly understood all the information. No, that wasn't right. Her train of thought was wrong from the start. It wasn't just her, even the people from the army had fallen into Kawang's trap. Regardless of whether it was these girls who liked to bully others or the transfer students who had been arranged beforehand, it was just to divert the attention of others. Even if someone came to investigate, the target would be focused on this and ignore everything else. At this moment, Bojo was reminded of what the Almighty had told her. The true nature of psychological guidance was similar to magic, because there was no difference in the way it was operated and the effects were the same. The more powerful the magician, the more attention he could divert. When you paid too much attention to one thing, it would be easy to neglect other things. Bojo's eyes lit up. She should know who exactly King was. Kawang was a criminal psychologist. In the Almighty's words, he was probably a multi-level marketing brainwasher. Such a person would find stupid people to do the low-level work. But he wouldn't let stupid people do the work for him. Hence, this king had to be smarter than anyone else and had a clearer vision than anyone else. The student who hadn't come. Bojo carried her bag. When there was no one behind her, she found a staircase and stopped. Then she moved and hid inside. When she unzipped the bag, the contents were revealed. They were all electronic devices. Laptops, chargers, and small listening devices. No one had noticed that while they had been chatting with Bojo, the listening devices had been spread out and placed on their bags. Bojo didn't seem to care if the floor was dirty. She leaned against the wall and opened the small laptop. Without a second word, she used the school network to enter from the inside. She avoided the firewall and used the virtual IP address to tamper with the program, locking onto the student's file. In less than a minute, a photo appeared on the laptop screen. It was a boy. He had decent looks and even seemed gentle. Perhaps it was because of his gentleness. His face looked a little sickly. From the information, he seemed to come from a wealthy family. But the reason for the long leave was very vague. Bojo glanced at the description. Poor health? What else? Bojo was just about to pull the preview down when the screen stopped. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps could be heard from the other side. Bojo's fingers paused. The figure was getting closer and closer. When it was right in front of her, the white coat fluttered with the wind, carrying a faint smell of formalin. Chapter 12:26. Bojo stilled. The man bent down, a smile on his face. Why are you hiding in such a place? Bojo tilted her head. She seemed to be trying to cover the screen. The man lowered his gaze, a dangerous glint flashing past his eyes. When his gaze landed on the screen, the dangerous glint disappeared. Seems like you are an internet addict. Bojo was like a student who had been caught playing secretly by her teacher. When she stood up, her laptop was placed at the side. Her earphones fell from her movements and the game sound was blasted from the computer. At this moment, Bojo finally saw the man's attire. He was wearing a sweater underneath his white coat. He looked refined and coupled with his gold-rimmed glasses, it was easy to let one's guard down. The man watched as the youngster sized him up. He smiled. Don't worry, I'm just a school doctor. I'm not like your teacher who would care about your gaming. But there's a form you have to fill in. Every student has to submit a medical report. Since you transferred here at this time, you have to have one too. Let's go, follow me to the infirmary. Bojo wasn't completely cooperative. Teacher, school has ended. I have time to fill it up after school. The school doctor walked forward. Bojo's thin lips twitched. She reached out to grab her backpack and threw it behind her back. At this moment, she was like a hedonistic son of a rich family. There was even a hint of mischievousness in her. Bojo did this because it wasn't easy to find her in this place. In a school like this, she had to be on her toes at all times. Even Bojo didn't know why. Even though the weather was bright and sunny, whenever she was in the school, she would feel that the atmosphere wasn't right. The atmosphere wasn't something that could be seen at a glance. It was a subtle change in the details. Or perhaps, Lu Jianning's incident had given her a wake-up call. At the same time, Bojo felt a certain amount of pressure. Hence, Bojo didn't let her guard down against anyone. When she lowered her lids, her fingers moved. Her left hand, which was in her pocket, was holding onto a USB stick. Other than the USB stick, there was also the mini listening device. In reality, the first thing Bojo noticed wasn't the sound of footsteps. Instead, he smelled something in the air. She seemed to have smelled it somewhere before, but she couldn't remember where she had smelled it from. If it hadn't been Bojo, someone else wouldn't have been able to clean up all traces in such a short period of time. Moreover, they would still be able to look as though nothing had happened. At this hour, there weren't many people in the infirmary. Only a few students who lived on campus were getting their medicine. Take a seat. As the school doctor spoke, he took out a pen from the pocket of his white coat. This is the information. Fill it up first and do a basic physical examination later. Physical examination? Bojo paused. With her current situation, if she went for a medical examination, everything would be exposed. She couldn't do the physical examination. Bojo placed both hands on the table and leaned forward. Sir, you didn't mention anything about a medical examination. I don't want to do it. Besides, I don't have any medical history, it's all written in my file. The school doctor pushed his spectacles, his gaze deepening. Then he smiled. You can skip the physical examination, but you have to fill up the rest of the information. I'm in charge of the psychological counseling for all the students. Other than knowing your physical condition, I have to know your current condition. This is a requirement of the school. If you don't fill it up, I'll call your parents over tomorrow for a chat. That's really strict. Bojo was unwilling. The school doctor's lips lifted. From his perspective, there was a problem with the transfer at this time. If there was really a problem, he would definitely get rid of her. But from the looks of it, there was still a need to observe. At least she looked like a young master who didn't like school. Why did you transfer at this time? It's almost the end of the year exams, aren't you afraid of affecting your studies? He asked casually. Bojo replied lazily, my family arranged it for me. They probably think that I'm far away from the school and would settle any mistakes I make. Heh. The school doctor pushed his spectacles up the bridge of his nose. After that, he didn't have any more questions. For a moment, there was only the sound of scribbling in the infirmary. That sound made Bojo feel sleepy. Until her phone vibrated in her pocket. Bojo shook that feeling off. She swiped her fingers across the screen and glanced up. Sir, if there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first. I have an appointment with a classmate. You've just arrived and you're already acquainted with a new classmate. It seems like there won't be any problems. The school doctor placed his pen down. Bojo asked casually, what problems will there be? That will depend on the students themselves. Some might encounter difficulties when they try to blend in. The school doctor smiled. Then he stopped. Bojo was still thinking about the person who hadn't come to school. She didn't notice anything strange about the school doctor. But she understood one thing. She shouldn't ask any random questions here. Even though she was interested in the difficulties the school doctor had mentioned, Bojo didn't allow herself to show it. Instead, she seemed to be in a rush, carrying the impatience of a youngster. The school doctor sealed all the documents. It's fine if you're just classmates, but the school doesn't allow for a relationship. With that, the school doctor waved his hand indicating that she could leave. Bojo was about to lift her bag when the person on the other end spoke again. Oh right, you aren't allowed to bring your laptop either. Leave the laptop in your bag with me for now, I'll pass it to your form teacher. Bojo turned towards the direction of the voice. The school doctor's hand was already on her bag. Even the laptop? The school doctor bent his fingers, tapping the school rules on the table. There was indeed a rule that forbade anyone from bringing any electronic products into school. It specifically mentioned laptops and phones. As a student. On the surface she was a student. Bojo was clear that some rules had to be followed. Besides, with the time difference, she wasn't sure if the school doctor had seen it or not. Even though she had removed everything as soon as possible, but, what is it? Is there a secret in the laptop? The school doctor chuckled. Bojo grabbed her hair, looking troubled. I have to play games tonight and school is over. I won't bring it tomorrow. Seems like there really is a secret. The school doctor opened the youngster's bag, pulling the laptop out. You weren't just playing games, right? Bojo's hand tightened in her pocket. She reached out with her other hand as though she wanted to stop the school doctor's actions. But it was obvious she wouldn't be able to make it in time. The laptop was flipped open, the screen lighting up. The school doctor glanced at the video on the table, arching a brow. You're watching such a thing? Bojo reached out, closing the laptop. Her face was flushed. The school doctor chuckled. That's normal, who hasn't been young before? It isn't appropriate to hand such a thing to your form teacher. Look at the school rules, it's better not to bring such electronic products in. Emimich, Bojo replied, returning the bag to her hands. In that instant, the school doctor hadn't seen anything such as the video recording. Bojo had closed the laptop at the right time. The video was enough for many to ignore the small logo at the bottom of the screen. The clock on the wall had struck 6. There weren't any other students in the infirmary at this moment. A faint yellow light shone in. Bojo hadn't noticed the gaze of the school doctor behind her. His gaze was deep and probing. The next moment the phone rang. The school doctor picked up the phone, placing it by his ear. Hello. Fanjia, you're back. I've checked the information, there aren't any problems. It was Scorpion. Should I contact Prince? The school doctor walked to the window, his gaze never leaving the young man. You can contact him. Stall him for 2 days. I'll finish this quickly. After 2 days we'll have a lot of helpers. Soon, when they realize what's going on and want to save him, they'll realize that these people will only make them feel the existence of hell. The school doctor's voice was clearly different from before. When facing the students he seemed like a listener. But in reality, once you listened, you would be able to understand everyone's psychology better. The investigators had thought of many ways to investigate the methods the school doctor had used to contact the students and the methods he had used to hypnotize them. But after half a day of investigation, there hadn't been any results. Kawang was in the school and with his identity, no one would suspect anything. No one would have expected the gentle and harmless school doctor to be the creator of all the darkness. Kawang's disguise was perfect. Rather than calling it a disguise, it would be more accurate to say that he was a doctor. As a professor he knew what the students were thinking. Moreover, he majored in psychology. It didn't seem out of place for him to be in the school. Hence, it wasn't just the military who hadn't found Kawang. Even Bo Jio hadn't thought about it. That was the most dangerous part. At this moment, more than 1,000 kilometers away in a messy residential area, there was a huge shed. Occasionally, there would be a few people holding onto semi-automatic assault rifles, patrolling the area. Inside the shed, there were all kinds of gambling games, and the tables for each game were surrounded by gamblers. The gamblers present were all shouting the numbers they wanted, hoping that they could win a lot here. But the most eye-catching thing wasn't the chips on the table, it was the smell of smoke. "Are you sure this is the place they arranged to meet?" Prince, who had been pretending to be a nouveau riche, turned to ask Hunter. Hunter tilted his head. "They contacted Boss, the firearms seller is the middleman. What do you think?" Prince lowered his voice. "This is no different from being trapped in a wolf's den. Why would Boss agree? Even if he agreed, he should have prepared some weapons. Why do you think he asked you to wear this outfit?" Hunter shifted, his bodyguard positioning was perfect. Prince asked, "Isn't Boss trying to make it obvious that I'm rich?" Right here, among so many people, he was the only one who was wearing a large leather coat. His clothes were all made of metal, and the sound of metal clanking could be heard. But very quickly, Prince realized he might not be able to wear the leather outfit because there was a detection door installed at the entrance of the casino. No metallic items could be brought into the casino, and anyone who wanted to enter had to go through the detection door. Hence, other than the drug bandits, no one else was allowed to bring weapons into the casino, not even a nail clipper. A hint of nervousness flashed past Prince's eyes when he saw the door. He couldn't help but glance at the person beside him. The devil was indeed a devil. No matter what he saw, he could remain calm and his aura was strong. He only said one sentence to Prince, "Don't bother, let's go." He wasn't sure if it was because of the devil's aura, but Prince took on the attitude of a nouveau riche. His eyes seemed to grow on top of his head as he walked forward. "Sir, you can't enter like this." As expected, the bodyguard in black extended his hand. Hunter and Exorcist glanced at each other. They didn't have any hidden equipment on them, but Prince's metallic items were enough for the detector to go off. Besides, they weren't ordinary decorations. Some weapons looked like that after they were dismantled. The moment the bodyguard in black walked over, Chinemo spoke before he could. "Your boss invited us here. Are you not going to let us in because you don't want this business anymore?" When the bodyguard in black heard this, he stopped in his tracks. In fact, forget about the reaction of the bodyguards in black. Even if the boss of the other party was here, he would probably be shocked by his boss's aura. The bodyguard in black hesitated. "Hold on." With that, he turned and spoke into the Bluetooth earpiece. Very quickly he walked back. "It's a misunderstanding. Boss has been waiting for you for a long time. Please." Chapter 12:27. Let them in. Scorpion glanced at the screen in front of him. From the moment they had entered, Scorpion had been watching their every move. There was no sound, but he could see their actions. It was indeed as the rumors had said. He wasn't sure about other things, but in terms of money, they shouldn't be faking it. He was afraid that there would be other problems. But since nothing had happened on Old Q's side, it proved that this group of people could try to interact and hold them back. Scorpion stood up with his wine glass, reaching out to turn off the screen. At the very least, he couldn't let them know that he was observing them. Change to another room. Yes. The people standing at the side were all carrying long guns. Gun ownership was legal in Country T. Moreover, in such a place no one would care. But recently, Country T had been putting in more effort to deal with drugs. That was why Scorpion wanted to clear the goods in his hands as soon as possible. It was easy in Country T as long as there were enough profits. There would be people who would give them convenience. The difficult part was the exit. Even though they had many overseas markets, their biggest market was China. China had already joined forces with many countries to exert pressure on the TM region, as though they were determined to eradicate them. But in this place, some laws weren't useful. Hence, they couldn't use China's methods. They were worried that the other party would try to get information out of them. They weren't afraid because no one could find them in the Golden Triangle. Even this place was just a distribution point. They could use this distribution point to test the other party, to see if they really had the money and connections to do business or if they had other motives. Scorpion seemed to be in charge of everything, but in reality, every step he took was an order from Kawang. With such a huge lineup, even Old Q had thought that Kawang would come. That was what he had told Prince and the rest. Even though Crown Prince looked a little dumb, he was actually very vigilant in this aspect. Before coming, he had asked his boss what he would do if he saw Kawang. But his boss had only replied, "He won't be here, today was just a test." Prince hadn't understood at the time, but now that he saw Scorpion welcoming them, he understood everything. On the other side, Scorpion was dressed in black and had a tattoo on his face. When he looked over, his gaze carried a darkness that was different from that of an ordinary person. "Sit," Scorpion said in the local language, a glass of wine in his hand, his aura menacing. Prince wasn't inferior, he sat down and went straight to the point. "Tell me, how many goods do you have? I want all of them." After listening to the translator, Scorpion leaned back. "We do have a lot of goods, but the current situation is that China's control is very strict. I have a lot of connections that I can't use, and we can't even get through the customs. Our people can't just take out the goods casually, and it's impossible to estimate how much we have. Old Q should have told you that we have a special plantation base and the quantity is easy to handle, but how can you guarantee that you can enter the border? Old Q should have told you about the goods." In order to feign ignorance, Crown Prince waited for the translator to finish before replying, "Of course we have our own ways." Scorpion raised an eyebrow. "I want to know the specifics." "Specifics?" Prince's fingers paused, but he didn't speak. After all, ever since he came in, his every move had been planned by his boss. If Prince were to explain in detail how to avoid the customs, he wouldn't be able to. On the other side, Scorpion was still looking at him. Seeing that he did not reply immediately, his eyes gradually narrowed. Prince knew very well what those gazes were. Guesses, suspicions, and even danger. His hand tightened on the handle of the chair. The surrounding air turned cold as well. His heartbeat also changed accordingly. The people standing at the side were all armed with guns and they were all looking over. The atmosphere was extremely tense. Scorpion was about to ask another question. Qin Mo, who was standing at the side, said casually, "The specific method will affect the interests of some people. Our boss has connections with the customs. It's not just the customs, we also have connections with other places. This is the most important aspect of doing business in China. We can't guarantee that every batch of goods will pass, but we will be able to hear the news. How can the checks not be strict? The reason our business is so big is also because of our connections." Qin Mo's words were very realistic. In less than a second, Scorpion's expression clearly changed after listening to the story. All these years he had been trying to build his own connections in China. But later on he realized that he needed a background to achieve that. At this point, everything was clear. It seemed like they weren't just rich, they were probably from an old family in China. Previously, when they were at Old Q's place, he had heard their conversation. The person in the leather trench coat was just a rich second-generation heir. The real decision-maker was the investment consultant. At that time, he hadn't understood why such a capable person would be willing to work for a rich second-generation heir. But now everything was clear. It was because of his family background. Scorpion raised his hand and pressed it down. Prince knew that the deal was almost ruined. It wasn't just ruined, Scorpion's suspicions towards them had reached a certain level. Only, under such circumstances, his boss was able to resolve all their suspicions with one sentence. Qin Mo hadn't finished his sentence. "We are here to earn money. We are more concerned about safety than you, especially when it comes to entering the country. But until now, we haven't seen your sincerity in working together. We haven't even seen your real boss. We will wait for your boss to be willing to meet us before we can talk." With that, Qin Mo stood up. He was dressed in a well-ironed suit, giving off a strong sense of business aura. "We are also looking at the cooperation." Scorpion stood up as well. "Sir, don't be in such a hurry. We are sincere in our cooperation, but there has been a huge commotion in China recently. It's better to be careful. As for our boss, he has the same intentions. If we meet a spy here, we won't be able to cry even if we want to. Once everything is ready and we can officially proceed with the transaction, our boss will appear. But before that, we need to take a look. From the sounds of it, we are suspected to be a spy." Prince scoffed. "You really have a lot of concerns." This was Prince's persona. It wasn't a problem for him to say such things. Scorpion chuckled, walking over. "Our sincerity is the same as yours. But there are some things that need to be investigated thoroughly. You can investigate however you want." Qin Mo glanced over, his elegant aura forming. "But my boss doesn't give me much time. I have to give him an answer by the day after tomorrow. That is the deadline. If you wish to continue the discussion, you can contact me anytime. With that, Qin Mo glanced over at Prince. Prince was confused. This wasn't what they had agreed on. Hadn't they agreed on a deal today? Could it be? Prince lifted his lids, glancing over at Qin Mo's hand. He had one hand in his pocket, and his slender fingers were tapping there. It seemed like a casual action, but it was a signal. There's a change in the situation, retreat immediately. There was nothing more, just these 8 words. But even so, in that instant, Prince felt the change in the atmosphere. No one knew what had changed. Except for Fatty, who was still in the car. Not because of anything else, but because he saw a familiar face that made his heart sink. Fanjia. The culprit who had created so many unfair cases in Jianghu City. Why was she here all of a sudden? After all, they had received news that she wasn't in charge of such matters. Therefore, when Fatty saw that face, he immediately sent a message to the inside. He could only send a message once because that was the extent of his infiltration. Especially when Fatty thought of something else. That Fanjia seemed to have seen their boss before. Fatty's eyes widened. He tried to contact his boss for the second time. The situation inside was complicated. Before the discussion was settled, Scorpion wouldn't let Qin Mo leave. Hence, it was inevitable that time would be delayed. When Qin Mo heard that she had already entered, his gaze deepened. Boss, you need to think about it. We need to think about it too. If you really think too much, you can arrange some entertainment programs for us. As for the official matters, we can discuss them after your investigation. Scorpion chuckled. That can be done. We don't have many things here, but we have plenty of entertainment programs. Prince listened at the side. He didn't understand why his boss had brought up this topic and even mentioned entertainment programs. But deep down, he knew that it was directly related to the change in the situation. Magician and Hunter had been on many overseas missions. It was just that during this kind of mission, the other party had never found a beautiful woman to accompany them. The most important thing was that boss actually picked one out of the bunch. His lips curled into a faint smile. The rest are yours. The girl who was chosen felt her heart almost jumping out of her chest. She had never seen such a charismatic man. This time she was really lucky. Whether it was Hunter or Prince, they couldn't accept the fact that their boss had chosen a girl just like that. Under normal circumstances, their boss would reject all women. Chapter 12:28. Qin Mo had done this. It was to avoid meeting Fanjia face to face. Even though he had put on a disguise, if one took a closer look, they would still be able to see traces. The best way was to prevent her from seeing him at a close distance. He might even disappear from the surveillance cameras in the lobby. From the moment he entered, he knew there were cameras everywhere. Even though he seemed to be walking casually, he had never been caught in front of a camera. This time there was an extra person blocking the camera. Prince was still in a daze when he saw Fanjia. Magician's gaze changed when he saw Fanjia walking in. Fanjia hadn't seen them in Jianghu City. However, they knew which cases were committed by this person. She hid in the university and used the internet to cover up the truth. If boss hadn't locked onto her, even now Jianghu City wouldn't have peace. That was the first time Magician understood how unfathomable a person's heart was. Fanjia seemed to be able to brainwash people. He didn't know why people would respond to the things she did. The case that left the deepest impression on Magician was the copyright infringement case. In his heart, stealing was a crime. How could a thief be supported? He couldn't understand. But such things and such people existed in this world. The funniest thing was that they thought they were kind. It turned out that ignorant kindness was scarier than pure evil. Besides, they were tolerating a thief who didn't admit to stealing. But life was like the original novel. No matter how much you liked someone, you shouldn't use any excuses to offend someone. To put it bluntly, when he committed these crimes, didn't he have any idea what was going on? It was obvious that he knew everything. It was just that some people connived, which was why these people became even more profitable. Fanjia knew better than them what the people on the internet were thinking. When she was escaping, they were able to find a hostage who was willing to divert her attention. They rarely failed their missions. Ever since they encountered this organization, they had to think a lot about every step they took. This was because this organization knew where to start and what methods to use to suppress their actions. Regardless of what happened, they couldn't lay their hands on ordinary citizens, even if their hearts were black. Magician clenched his fists, worried that Fanjia would recognize him. Moreover, he didn't know why, but there was a faint sense of unease in his heart. That uneasiness was not because he was afraid of the other party. But he was afraid that everything would repeat itself. She was still dressed like that. Some people seemed to be like that. No matter what they did, they wouldn't feel guilty. They would blame everything on someone else and still think that they were innocent. Therefore, she didn't change her appearance. She still looked like a student. As soon as she walked in, many gamblers stopped what they were doing. However, they recognized Fan Jiao. With a glance, they lowered their heads and continued gambling. With this time difference, Qin Mo and his men disappeared into the crowd and passed through the entertainment hall safely. A few burly men standing guard at the third door were holding semi-automatic machine guns and scanning the surroundings with serious expressions. The safety on the machine guns was off, ready to fire at any time. Magician heaved a sigh of relief. That side profile shouldn't have been seen. Even though Qin Mo was walking in front, he could still hear what was happening behind him. His deep eyes darkened again. The girl following Qin Mo was still thinking about how to make this handsome and rich man stay. Her heart was beating rapidly and her cheeks were flushed. What the girl didn't expect was that they really did get a room. However, after getting a room, the man was much colder than when he was outside. Qin Mo opened his wallet, pulling out a wad of cash and placing it on the cabinet. He leaned against the window and took out a lighter. He tilted his head and lit a cigarette, his voice calm. "How much money can you get here?" The girl didn't understand why he would ask such a question. But no one was like him, coming in without touching her, as though she had germs on her. Qin Mo held the cigarette between his fingers as he continued. "I can give you 10 times and even send you back home." The girl's eyes lit up. She had been abducted to this place. She had come overseas to look for a job, but she hadn't expected it to be such a job. It wasn't that she hadn't thought of escaping, but she had been caught every single time. "Brother Scorpion's power is so great it's impossible," the girl said softly. Qin Mo replied slowly, "We are working together, he will do me this favor." The girl's eyes lit up. She was curious as to how the man knew she wanted to return home. It was a pity that the man didn't seem to want to talk to her. "Do you agree or not?" The girl blushed again. "Okay. Then create a commotion. It has to be bigger than the one next door." With that, Qin Mo put out the cigarette in the ashtray and reached out to open the window. The girl instantly understood what he meant. But even though she understood, when the man disappeared from the window, she couldn't help feeling disappointed. That kind of person probably wouldn't be interested in people like her. The girl walked over and kept the money on the cabinet. In the entertainment hall, Fan Jia didn't say much. Instead, she lowered her voice and whispered into Scorpion's ear, "Where is the consultant that you mentioned? Once I meet him, I can investigate his identity." "If you had come earlier, you would have been able to see him, but now..." Scorpion smiled. "He's still busy inside. All of them are here. You can take a look. The one in the leather coat is the young master inside. He's stupid but has a lot of money. His father should have a strong background there. Go check it out. If there's no problem, we'd better close the deal as soon as possible. After all, we're not the only ones they want to work with." Fan Jia glanced over at Prince, who was gambling. She watched his extravagant lifestyle, the way he hugged the girl so skillfully that she couldn't see any problems. But this was her master's order, she couldn't make any mistakes, she had to make sure everything was right. "Bring me to the consultant." Fan Jia's eyes sank. "The room is the only place without a surveillance camera, how can you be sure he is fine?" Scorpion's fingers paused as though he had realized the problem as well. He led Fan Jia in. Magician and Prince looked like they were indulging themselves, but in reality, they weren't looking at the wine, they were looking at the images reflected through the wine glasses. When they saw the two of them heading in the direction Qin Mo had gone, their hands tightened around the wine glasses. Magician almost bolted up from his seat, but without his boss's orders, none of them could move. Hence he could only panic. Why did the two of them go to the boss's side? Did Fan Jia notice something? No, that wasn't possible. Fan Jia shouldn't have seen anything at that moment. Magician told himself to calm down, but those who hadn't experienced the previous mission wouldn't be able to understand the feeling. His fingers couldn't help but reveal some of his emotions. At this moment, Prince bolted up from his seat. But his actions were much more natural, he pushed his cards forward. Boring. He tilted his head and looked at his nominal bodyguard. "Let's go somewhere else to play." When he said this, Prince glanced to the side. His meaning was obvious, he wanted Magician to pay attention to the camera. If he wasn't careful, he might be caught. Magician released his hand, breaking into a smile. He seemed to have found his previous self, unrestrained and unrestrained. "I think it's a good place. Young master, shall we go for a walk? Let's go. Prince heaved a sigh of relief. He wasn't sure what was going on, but he could sense his comrade's emotions. The emotions were definitely related to his boss. The two of them glanced at each other. Prince took a step forward, still looking like a rich second-generation heir who reared fur and walked his dog. At this moment, Fan Jia and Prince were almost at Qin Mo's room. Scorpion wanted to signal for the person behind him to take out the key to open the door. Unexpectedly, the moment he pressed on the doorknob, the ambiguous sounds came from the room. Fan Jia heard it too, frowning. Scorpion chuckled. See, I told you that you are overthinking. You don't understand, no matter how capable a man is, he will fall for such things. Who would think about whether there is a camera in the room when they are working? The sounds grew louder. It was this sound that dispelled most of Fan Jia's suspicions. Someone so obsessed with women didn't seem like someone sent by China. Just as this thought settled in her mind, someone walked over. More people walked over. It was Prince and the rest. Prince looked as though he had just met them. Then he smiled like a rich man. Boss Poison, what are you going to do? I wanted our expert hacker to meet Consultant. Even though she doesn't appear often, she should be able to find something online. She should be able to chat with Consultant, but I didn't expect him to be busy. Gambler's words sounded like he was being straightforward, but there was a small trap hidden in it. He wanted to see how they would react when they heard about the expert hacker. After all, no matter what kind of spy they were, they would be afraid of finding out their true identity. Prince reacted, his face filled with excitement. He even whistled. Expert hacker? So amazing? Like 007? When are you going to show me? Scorpion wasn't going to let them know how amazing Fan Jia was. He had only mentioned it to see their reaction. Now that Prince had asked him, it wasn't easy for him to reply. He could only change the topic. There's quite a commotion here, it isn't a good place to talk. Let's go somewhere else. That's fine too. The Crown Prince shouted towards the door. Advisor, take it easy. He said that so that his image wouldn't collapse. But Prince's heart had already collapsed. Well, what was going on? Boss, was it for real? That voice couldn't be faked. Indeed, it couldn't be faked. But no one knew that the girl had been alone in the room the entire time. Young Master Qin had already landed. His movements were swift and nimble, not making a sound when his feet touched the ground. In a place where there were no cameras, he would not have so many scruples. He strode toward the business car parked not far away. Fatty, who was still anxious, made a decision to contact the higher-ups to get her back. Regardless, it was more important to keep her safe. There was a swoosh. The car door was pulled open. Fatty's eyes widened as he stared at the noble face. He couldn't help but ask, Boss, why are you here? Is it strange that I'm here? Qin Mo's voice didn't change at all. Fatty opened his mouth, wanting to ask how it wasn't strange. Shouldn't you be in the room? But when he glanced at his boss's aura, he didn't have the courage to ask. Qin Mo sat down, tilting his head towards the commotion outside the car window. From now on, stop all intrusions to prevent them from noticing anything. Go in and ask them to come out, it's time for them to have a taste of the cold. Yes, Fatty replied before alighting. Qin Mo dialed a string of numbers. He didn't call Bo Jio, instead he called the old general. Besides talking about the progress, he was calling the old general because he couldn't control himself anymore. He missed her and knew that if he called her, she would be able to find out where he was. Fan Jia's appearance reminded Qin Mo of the last time he closed his eyes. She had been wearing a mask, floating on the surface of the water on her last breath. Qin Mo's fingers tightened, unable to adjust his emotions. Right now he just wanted to know about her. Qin Mo had never felt such a long phone call. Until a voice came from the other end. Hello. Qin Mo opened his eyes, his voice faintly. Fan Jia is here, Fatty's skills won't be able to fool her. Get someone to send Prince's photo and news to prove that he is a rich second-generation heir. I'll get someone to do it immediately. The old general's expression was solemn. This was a critical period and he was afraid of missing out on a call from Qin Mo. It was best if they didn't contact him when he was out for an overseas mission. Qin Mo had mentioned that he would contact them if anything happened. How are you guys? Are you all right? The old general was still worried about their safety, especially if they had a hacker. Their communication would be a problem and they would have to deal with Kawang as well. Qin Mo replied, You guys disguised yourselves well. The old general heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 1229. After hearing this, the old general was stunned. His hand that was holding onto the phone was a little stiff. However, he had already communicated this matter with the higher-ups. When Qin Mo was outside, no one knew what was wrong with him. His hypnosis would be triggered. He couldn't let him know that the kid had left yet. Since Tang Mo was the one who wanted to go over, there wouldn't be any problems. The old general steadied his tone. I did. Where did you find him? He's so smart that it's hard to fool him. How did you reply? Qin Mo was still looking out of the window, analyzing the situation. The old general let out a long sigh. It's all according to what you said before you left. However, before he could finish, the child had already driven off. Even now, the old general was still throwing a tantrum because of this matter. Seriously, he felt that he had let down Qin Mo. But he had no choice. Other than calling the Tang family to ask for Qin Mo, there was nothing else he could do. Moreover, anything that affected Qin Mo's emotions during this period would be fatal. Fortunately, the mission would be completed in 2 days. The old general glanced at the time and said, "What else do you need? If not, I'll inform my superiors immediately." "Okay, you can go." Qin Mo hung up the phone, still feeling uneasy. He lit a cigarette for himself as though this was the only way to suppress his emotions. Perhaps no one knew. Ever since Qin Mo came to this place, there would always be some fragmented images and sounds in his mind. He tilted his head and could vaguely see the red line around his neck. Below the red line was an amulet. Qin Mo took out the amulet and held it in his palm. Under the sunlight, his side profile still carried an air of nobility that couldn't be dispersed. The operation went smoothly and they retreated in time. No one was left behind. Both prince and magician were stunned when they saw Qin Mo in the car. After all, they had heard the live version. Even though they were standing outside the door, the sound was clear. Boss should be in the room, why was he here? The two of them glanced at each other and asked instinctively, the sound in the room just now. Is it that hard to buy a cry? Qin Mo placed the amulet down and leaned back. His tone was indifferent. On the other hand, the two of them admired each other like idiots. Prince couldn't help but sigh in his heart. There was actually such a method. Little Black, your brother is really the devil, the top-notch kind. He must have predicted that someone would go there and simply bribe the young lady inside. This was really awesome. Magician spoke up. Fanjia is here. If boss appears again, she might recognize him. Hearing this, the atmosphere in the car fell into a moment of silence. After all, they could have caught this person back then, but because of a hostage they kept the hidden danger until now. Prince didn't know what had happened. But looking at everyone's expressions, he could guess a thing or two. The current situation was not in their favor. Qin Mo raised his hand and glanced at the time. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Instead, there was a layer of ice. When she recognizes me, it will be time for her to collect her corpse. Magician knew that his boss wasn't joking. After all, his boss had intended to do so back then. Fanjia was too dangerous. She and Kawang were the same type of person. She would subtly influence others, treating the wrong as the right, using hatred as the dominant factor in their thoughts. Such a person would only consider things from his own point of view. Gradually they lost their bottom line. Their worldview could be different. But once they lost their bottom line, they would harm the heavens and distort the truth. That wasn't a problem of worldview. It was a problem in itself. The scariest thing was that these people claimed to be weak. When their hearts were twisted, they were scarier than demons. Fanjia and Kawang were experts in nurturing such people. At this moment, everyone realized something. They couldn't be like before, doing whatever they wanted. Because the real battle was coming. This was a psychological battle. It wasn't something that could be won just by being anxious. Time was tight, but when it came to Qin Mo, there wasn't a single ripple. The operation team stopped. For the past 2 days, young master had been spending money like a butterfly. He spent a lot of money to buy this and that. Now that he suddenly stopped, his hands were itching. The moment this thought entered his mind, his boss's phone rang. The caller ID showed that it was Scorpion. Qin Mo sat there looking at the screen indifferently. It lit up for a while before dimming. This was the second one. Prince didn't understand what his boss was thinking. After all, everything they had done for the past 2 days was to get Scorpion to work with them. Now that Scorpion had taken the initiative, his boss still didn't seem anxious. If he was really worried about being recognized, he could have just sent him. Did his boss have other plans? That was what Prince thought. After less than half an hour, Qin Mo reached for the phone on the table and called back. His tone was calm and indifferent. I'm sorry, boss Scorpion. I was discussing the price with someone and switched my phone to silent mode. What's the matter? Prince glanced at the glass of red wine and the assembled sniper rifle. He was impressed by his boss's imposing manner even when he was lying. It was obvious how black-bellied he was. Scorpion believed Qin Mo completely because his spies had told him that after this group of people became the main tank, they didn't just want to work with them. That was what worried Scorpion the most. He smiled and said, "I've already told my boss what the consultant said last time, but he hasn't replied yet." As for the consultant, I hope he won't be unable to get through. Scorpion was a deep thinker and thought about many things. With the cold weather, Scorpion started to worry that this batch of business would be snatched away. Hence, he didn't pay much attention to Qin Mo's identity anymore. Qin Mo still didn't show much enthusiasm. Scorpion hung up the phone. He narrowed his eyes and dialed another number. In the infirmary, a school doctor looked at the caller ID, turned off his phone and put it in his pocket. When he passed by a certain class, the corners of his mouth curled up. He glanced at the police who had infiltrated not far away and pushed up his glasses. So what if they found out that there was something wrong with this class? Some people had always been like this. And as the creator, he was merely guiding them into what they should be. If he could settle things here as soon as possible, he could go back and meet up with those people and see what kind of people they were. He could leave the rest to that child. After all, he had never disappointed him before. Regardless of whether it was in terms of making up stories or guiding willpower, he was good. Those foolish people thought that the problems in this school were recent. What a joke. He had chosen this place because there had been problems since a long time ago. He was well aware of the environment in which children with wild beasts would be born. He also knew that they would infect each other. After a long period of incubation coupled with some acquired factors, it would explode. Kawang was satisfied with such an environment. The girls would let the soft-hearted one run around to buy things. Everyone seemed to be laughing together, but in reality they were laughing because of her. Was it the girls' fault? Yes, they were. However, such a phenomenon was never a one-sided phenomenon. Compared to bullies, Kawang preferred those who didn't dare to retaliate even after being bullied. Oh no, it should be said that when someone wanted to resist, some people who were not involved would make all sorts of sounds to suppress that voice. Those who made sarcastic remarks and couldn't tell right from wrong were more suitable to be his fodder than bullies. After all, everything complemented each other. Dr. Wu, the school will be screening a movie tomorrow. They said it's a good movie for the students. The students liked the one that was screened last time. Do you have any good ones? Kawang glanced over, looking refined and elegant. Of course. That's great. The teacher in charge of screening the movie chuckled. Yes, that's great. Be it the time or the location, everything was perfect. Kawang walked forward. The teacher watched the back view of the school doctor with a frown. Did Dr. Wu's legs catch a cold? Why did he seem to be walking awkwardly today? But the teacher didn't think too much about it. When he glanced into the classroom, he realized that the new transfer student wasn't in school. Indeed, Bojio wasn't in school. Instead, she was in her school uniform, a school bag slung over her shoulders. She pressed the doorbell naturally. Coming. The woman opened the door. When she saw the youngster's attire, she was slightly taken aback. You are. Bojio smiled, revealing her canine teeth. She was radiant, her hair still dripping with raindrops. Hello, Andy, I'm Li Jin's classmate. My teacher saw that I live nearby and asked me to inform him that there's a movie tomorrow. Also, this is his book. The woman was puzzled. Since when did her son have such a classmate? But her son wasn't a talkative person. He didn't even go to school recently. The woman had wanted to ask about the situation, but it seemed like there wasn't a need. Little Jean went out, he'll be back in a while. The woman was a gentle person. She watched as it started to rain. The weather is really bad, it's sunny one moment and then it's raining the next. Is your house far? Bojio didn't reply. Instead, she sneezed and reached out to rub the bridge of her nose. She was drenched in the rain because of her son's book. The woman couldn't let her leave just like that. Child, come in and hide from the rain. You can leave after the rain subsides. Thank you, Auntie. Bojio was obedient. Chapter 1230. Li Jin was the only one who was absent. Regardless of whether her guess was right or wrong, she had to interact with him to find out more. If there was something wrong with Li Jin, she would be able to find Kawang by following the clues. Come, drink some water. The woman's words pulled Bojio back to her senses. Andy has something to ask you too. Bojo smiled. Go ahead. Did someone bully little Jean in class? Look at what I'm saying, this child doesn't want to go to school. I'm a little worried, so I asked the teacher, but the teacher couldn't say anything. Isn't it always shown on TV that children don't like to go to school? It's very likely that they've been bullied at school. His father and I are usually too busy to take care of him, so he grows slower than normal children. His physical condition isn't very good either. Now, he often goes to school in the infirmary and he even runs in the morning. I'm just worried that something is wrong with him and that he won't be able to get over it. Bojo glanced up. I'm sorry, Auntie, I just transferred over and don't understand the situation in class. It's fine, I'm just asking. The woman smiled. When you see little Jean later, don't tell him that I'm asking you about such things, he won't be happy. Okay, Bojo agreed. The woman stood up, glancing at the clock subconsciously. Bojo felt a hint of fear in her gaze. This was her home, what was she afraid of? Soon Bojo knew what she was afraid of. It was because of the man who had returned drunk. Bojo guessed that the woman had let her in not just to shelter from the rain but also because she wouldn't be as afraid with another person around. Why is it so cold? The man complained loudly the moment he entered. Tell me, what do I need you to do? You can't even take care of a home, you're useless. The woman took the things from the man's hands. The heater hasn't been turned on yet, little Jin's classmate is here. Hearing the last sentence, the man swallowed back his curses, but his expression was still not very good. It looked like he needed to beat someone up to appease his anger. Where's the food? Why aren't you cooking at this hour? Or are you trying to starve to death? The man lowered his voice. But even so, Bojo could hear it. The woman said in a low voice, Our son hasn't come back yet. We can eat when he comes back. There are still people here. That's your son, not mine? The man said. Bojo couldn't hear clearly. Perhaps the two of them also knew that they shouldn't wash their dirty linen in public. Bojo had done a background check on Li Jin. His mother had brought him over to remarry. Before she came here, it wasn't that she hadn't expected some things to happen. She just didn't expect such a family environment to be more complicated than she had imagined. The Almighty had once said that the occurrence of every case actually reflected the psychological demands of the criminal. Bojo tried to use the Almighty's method to describe a person. Of course, like the Almighty, she couldn't use psychological profiling to link that person's age, occupation, and even hobbies. However, the more he tried to prove himself to be an expert on the internet, the weaker he would be. The reason was simple. The more things you had, the less likely you were to show them off. You would only treat them as a pastime. The more one didn't have it, the more they would post it in their circle of friends, hoping that someone would see it. This is the most common example. Such a mindset was also applicable here. Judging from the king's actions, he liked to be in control, and he knew very well what kind of methods he could use to make someone feel uncomfortable even though they weren't punched or kicked. Unless he had experienced it himself and resisted. In that class, Li Jin was probably the first to be ostracized. But someone had suppressed his rebellious voice. It wasn't just in school, it was also in his family. Furthermore, he had always been submissive. Gradually, he had formed an inferiority complex. He had been giving orders online, but in real life, it had been hard to notice him. If Bojo hadn't been sure before, now that she had seen Li Jin's family environment, she was certain it was him. Besides, Li Jin's stepfather was likely a violent person. Bojo analyzed the situation, her mind calm and meticulous. After spending a long time with someone, one would indeed be affected. If it had been the old Bojo, she wouldn't have thought so much. Bojo was right. The woman didn't want the youngster to leave. It wasn't easy for someone to come over and the man would restrain himself. This way little Jean wouldn't be scolded when he returned. After all, the man was prideful. Hence, before Bojo could stand to leave, the woman spoke up. The woman was one step ahead of the young man. She said, Your uncle said that the rain outside is getting heavier. Xiao Jin will be back in 5 minutes. You can go to Xiao Jin's room and stay for dinner. You can tutor Xiao Jin. It's fine, Auntie, Bojo replied. The man walked over, the smell of alcohol still lingering on him. He wanted her to stay as well. Just as the woman had said, he was prideful. But when he glanced at the woman, there was a hint of viciousness. Even from where she was, Bojo could feel the woman's fear. She was trembling slightly, but she still stood beside the man like a hostess who valued peace. Bojo didn't reject him since she would be able to find out more if she went to his room. Besides, she had seen movies about domestic violence and understood that if such a marriage continued, the woman would probably be unwilling to leave. In China, marriage was more important to women than to men. Every single one of them had fantasized about marrying their Prince Charming and living a blissful life. But gradually, some problems would surface. They would realize that the person they liked wasn't the person they had imagined. He would fall in love with others because of the temptations of the outside world. Sometimes, it would be because he was under pressure and wanted to find excitement. Sometimes it would be because the girls outside were young. He would think that they were flowers and you were an old woman. He would even beat you up. He would beat you up when he was drunk, beat you up when he was angry, and beat you up when he was unhappy. At the start, it would be unbearable. After all, this wasn't the life you wanted. Countless people would come out to persuade you to bear with it. Even if it wasn't for yourself, you had to bear with it for the child. You couldn't divorce. If you divorced, what would people say about you? What would happen to the child? Hence you would bear with it. The man who begged you to forgive him wouldn't cherish you anymore. Year after year, day after day, you would get used to such a life. If someone gave you a chance to retaliate, you might think that they were a busybody. After all, you just wanted your husband to treat you better. You didn't really want to leave him. This was part of the domestic violence family. Because no matter what happened, no matter how severe the beating, she was still his wife. What? How could he control his wife? His wife was willing to let him beat her. This was something that was often heard in court. Such a man wasn't hateful. He was hateful. But the funny thing was that once a woman stood up to resist, she would sue him in court. Some people would come out and make superficial comments. She even sued her own husband. What is this woman thinking? Isn't it just her own man cheating outside? It's obvious that he seduced her outside. She can just settle the score with that person. She still has to live her life. Why is she fighting with her husband? Women should be smarter sometimes. So what if she took a few beatings? Isn't it because she was lazy? I'm really impressed. Usually it was the woman who said these words. And the scary thing was that domestic violence was addictive. In the long run, a woman wouldn't be able to leave a man who abused her. In psychology, some of the explanations were indeed frightening. But that was the reality. Those despicable people who liked to gossip and distort the truth were the real breeders. This world in some ways was very fair. What kind of person you were would attract the kind of people you were. If there were things that violated your principles, there would be people who would ask you to tolerate them. There was a beautiful relationship, but you needed to be able to tell if it was a really good man. Looking at the interaction between the two of them, Bo Jio quickly realized that the woman couldn't leave and wouldn't ask for a divorce. After all, other than fear, there was a hint of anticipation in her gaze. Bo Jio guessed that this was probably the reason for Li Jin's unhealthy mentality. After all, no child would be willing to see their mother being beaten. If it had been a child, he would have hated himself for being so weak and afraid. Because of his fear, he wouldn't even have the luck to save his mother. Thus, he would have wanted to escape. When he grew up, he would have shouted, "Why don't you get a divorce?" But by then it would be too late. Children raised by sick families were usually extremely sensitive. Even if their family conditions weren't bad, they would still be like this. Bo Jio wasn't afraid of violent tendencies. Her skills wouldn't be at a disadvantage. If he was worried, then so be it. Li Jin would hide everything in his heart. He would wash away the blood on his hands without saying a word and look for his next target. If that was the case, then her visit today was very likely to be detected by him. Bo Jio paused. She placed the planning form to the side. She had to be more careful. This person was learning computer programming and psychology. No matter which one of these two doors was taken out, it was very strange. Especially the latter. Now, whenever Bo Jio saw the word psychology, her heart would slow down. She couldn't let anyone see that the books had been touched. Bo Jio placed them back the way she had pulled them out. She had done it professionally. She wanted to see if there were any traces on the computer. She turned on the computer. Bo Jio frowned when she saw the date circled in red on the calendar on the wall. The 26th. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.